signed. Committee Room 29, 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 signed. Committee Room 29. 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 Sound. 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 Committee Room 29.
Nothing changes. So just when we've got everyone through for the public gallery, we'll then just move into open session. Okay, so is the live feed on? Okay. So good afternoon, members, and welcome to this afternoon's sitting of the Education Committee. I'll just cover housekeeping as a starter, and then we will make our way through the agenda. So I'd advise members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online, and I would advise those in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode and that all devices are muted, and I would remind everyone it's not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. So item 1 on the agenda today is apologies. We have an apology from Danny Baker, and I think apart from that we have everybody else here in the meeting. Item 2 on the agenda is chairperson's business. So a couple of things to cover here, and I think just given the context that we are in relation to the horrific attack in North Belfast, which was obviously widely circulated on social media and rightly caused huge levels of shock and distress across that community and Northern Ireland, and then also the unfolding violence that we saw on our streets at various locations across Northern Ireland yesterday evening, and an ongoing threat and suggestions of further unrest today. I would like to just begin at this stage by saying that I would like to approach any discussions around this purely through the lens, as we are in the Education Committee, of what is good for children and young people. I think there are clearly a whole range of wider political issues associated with these issues, but this committee should have its primary focus, in my view, as the welfare of children and young people, and I hope that we can conduct any discussions on that basis. I would put on record that the violence and unrest last night was totally unacceptable, and I hope that committee will join me in condemning it. We are of course aware of the horrendous attack and rightly the shock and outrage in relation to that. But we need to be very clear that many of those young people participating in the rioting and the unrest last night will have been of school age, and many impacted will have been children. So there will be kids today not at school as a result of what happened. There will be kids potentially left homeless as a result of the actions of those who took to the streets last night. And we have schools who are deeply concerned about the safety of their children, and we've seen schools close today also around the threat of unrest, and for some schools local to this area, even their schools were not accessible due to ongoing closure of roads. So that is an unacceptable situation, and I would hope that everybody around this committee table will want to join me in condemning that. I was going to propose a couple of actions. One of them was to write to the Minister and to the EA, but I think as we have the Minister here today, it's the right context to simply give the Minister, I think, the opportunity in the first instance to set out how his department and the EA will be responding. And there are a range of issues that arise from this. There will be a range of issues, I think, in relation to how we can ensure that children from ethnic minority communities are supported to feel safe going to school, and that they are supported within school in terms of any risk of bullying which may be coming from a racist perspective. I think there are issues as well around examinations. We've clearly seen today examinations have gone on, and we have had contact from both PPR and Annika today, which members should be aware of, flagging real concerns that there will be children, young people in our schools who may not have been able to attend to sit those exams. So I think we need to be seeking assurances around how they will be protected in that space. And I think I would like to seek assurances how schools will be supported to make those decisions around safety in what is a really, really febrile and fast-moving situation, where we are often relying on posts from anonymous accounts on social media to assess whether or not protests are or not going ahead. So it's an incredibly difficult position for our schools. So on that basis, certainly propose that we can raise these issues with the Minister, but I discussed with the Clerk earlier today, and when we had previous incidents of this nature in committee, we have agreed a joint statement from committee in relation to that. So I would like to propose that we do put a statement out from committee today condemning that the violence that we've seen, and that would be very much through the lens of supporting our children and young people. So I need access, I think, to that statement. So maybe perhaps the Clerk could read the statement out, and if members are content to agree, and then I'm happy also to open up for any other points or discussion or actions members may want to make.
Okay, so I think I circulated it. I think Julie has made an edit and Cara has made an edit.
I've read it, but I haven't edited it.
Okay, sorry, okay. Thanks so much. So the Assembly's Committee for Education today made clear its unanimous abhorrence of the racialised public disorder overnight. Speaking on behalf of the committee, Chairperson Nick Matheson, MLA, said, "The committee deplores the very frightening, divisive and traumatic effects of this on young people in school, particularly during exam time. The committee urges the Minister to take steps with executive colleagues to protect the undisrupted education and safety of all children, and to make every effort to safeguard them from bad actors who would implicate them in criminal activity and spoil their futures." The committee reiterates its previous position that every young person in Northern Ireland, whatever their background, must be respected, protected and supported.
Okay, members, so thank you for going through that. Can I'll bring in the Deputy Chair first of all. First of all, in relation to whether we are all in agreement in terms of that committee statement, which I hope is suitably focused on the welfare of children and young people to hopefully command support across the parties, and indeed any other actions or issues that members want to raise in relation to this. So I'll bring the Deputy Chair in and have an indication from John.
I certainly agree with the statement, Chair, first of all. Secondly, we saw after the Ballymena riots last year the problems that were created for children and young people as a result of that. And I hope on this occasion the Minister has a contingency plan in place to deal with the displacement of children, the trauma being suffered by children, and the issue around exams. And I've already had a number of schools on to me today where they have said that children, particularly from an ethnic background, are too afraid to go into school today. So hopefully something will be done about that to make sure that they aren't disadvantaged in terms of the exams.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
And I think we certainly that examination issue, we've had that correspondence, and I think we should be raising that with the Minister. But thank you, Deputy Chair. John, you'd indicated.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of issues. Because the children who have been victims, I'm sure disruption, there'll also be those who are under the age of 18 who have been perpetrating some of this violence, and some of it was obscene, like burning people's homes. I was in East Belfast last night, and the children who were masked and threatened me and threatened journalists were the age 12, 13, 14. So I think it is important to recognise that we also want the PSNI to ensure that we bring anyone involved in last night to justice. I know that can be done in a diversionary way. I don't want to sidetrack us here, but I also think we should recognise that there's a support for the police in investigating and ensuring that there's appropriate diversionary mechanisms in place for those children who've been caught up in this. Because there are victims out there as well. And to watch last night people fleeing their homes, to watch a bus burn, to watch journalists being intimidated, and sometimes young children are involved in this. I just think there should be something there, but making sure that there's justice for victims about what happened.
Okay, thank you, John. So is that in relation to the statement? I mean, my sense would be that the statement should be focused on matters within the remit of the Education Committee in terms of children's education. But look, we can take views from members around the table on that. David?
Thank you very much, Chair. And let's reflect on the events of the last few days. Thoughts continue to be with the victim of the attack a couple of nights ago. And we've seen a statement from his family making clear that they do not want that to be the justification for trouble on our streets. I myself and my colleagues have never been afraid to give voice to those who have legitimate and genuine concerns around particularly illegal immigration into Northern Ireland and into the UK. But what detracts from those concerns being heard is events like last night, and the people that were affected last night. Nobody should be affected by that kind of violence, but last night many local people and their families were affected too. There was targeting of those who were from a foreign national background as well, but my own wife spent late into the night evacuating the street because there was a gas leak caused by some of the trouble that had been in that street. Many people's lives were disrupted, many children's lives were disrupted, and that is not the way in which to flag any legitimate concerns that we have. And I think most people will have been distressed, and most people who have talked to me have been distressed by the scenes that they seen on our streets last night. I will continue to give voice to the concerns that our communities have, but like everyone else I would call for calm, and we do not want to see a repeat of the scenes that we saw last night.
Thank you, David. And just to confirm, content to release the statement that we've drafted. Okay. Any other contributions, Cara? Sorry, you indicated.
No, just to say, I really appreciate the statement. I think it's really spot on, and undeniably, children last night across the north have witnessed sheer violence, fires, riots, and I think this all comes back to the importance of youth clubs and youth workers in our communities who can really support, safeguard, and guide our children through these really troubling times. And I think we'll have an opportunity today to hopefully put that to the Minister. But I think the sentiment of our statement really, unites us as elected representatives in supporting our young people.
Well, thank you,
Can
Cara.
I make one more comment? Just on
John.
top of that, there's also, whether you put it in the statement, I'm happy with the statement, but there's a primary obligation here on parents as well. Last night there's 12, 13, 11, 14-year-olds out. It was foreseeable this was going to happen, and there needs to be a clear message from all of us. The parents need to tonight make sure that their children are not out of their sight, and also check what they're watching on social media, because they're being fired up by far-right bigots, and I can say that, and they're getting their truth in social media. But people are sitting in England trying to get people to go out and burn property in Northern Ireland who don't give a stuff about the people of Northern Ireland. So I just think in terms of parental responsibility, in terms of what your children are watching on social media, and also make sure, for goodness sake, they're in tonight. And there's real parental responsibility here.
Well, sometimes it's the parents who are standing spectating and directing children.
Yeah,
to
I
carry
saw
out
it
these
last
acts.
night, yeah. I challenged them. I was myself threatened. And unfortunately, people have encouraged people to use violence down the years, and it's in part of our culture.
Thank you, John. So Julie has indicated, don't have any other indications at this stage. I do just want to note the Minister is here, and I want to give him his due. He has, I think, done all he can to get out of the executive meeting as quickly as he could to be here today, so I don't think it would be reasonable to keep him waiting too much longer. So I'll bring Julie in, and then I think unless there's any other contributions, which obviously if members wish to speak they can.
I will be brief. I support the statement. I do want to add to the conversation that there were areas throughout Northern Ireland where there were peaceful protests, my own constituency being one of them. As David has said, like, if it's a legitimate concern, the right to protest peacefully is one that should be given. I do not, however, support any acts of violence at all. You cannot protest against violence by being violent, and that's just the bottom line. And not for the statement, but just to add to the conversation, John is right that there was a lot of negative influences on social media, but I would also like to add that a lot of our children and young people have seen the video of the attack, and we need to make sure that they are properly and appropriately supported. And again, As much as I commend many parents across the country, there are parents out there who need to A, know what their children are saying on social media, and B, know where they are in the evening time for their own future. Thank you.
I think, Julie, that's a very good point in relation to there will be children and young people, and I emphasise children who will have seen that video, who will be feeling profound distress as a result of that, and I think that is important to note. Okay, well, look, members, I thank you all for your contributions, and I think it's really positive that we can agree a statement from committee to go out in the context of what is it's been really a difficult couple of days. And again, I think it is just important also, and I thank David for noting that, to just ensure that we extend the thoughts and good wishes of this committee to the victim of the attack and to all those who were impacted by the violence on our streets last night. So thank you, members, for your contributions. The only other item that I have, which I'll cover very briefly, I did attend an event last week, the Taking Boys Seriously event, which was a policy consortium at Ulster University, and I just wanted to put on record my thanks to the organiser of that event. It was a really positive event. There were lots of really positive and inspiring perspectives. And I think in the context we're in today, this is really relevant on how we can engage boys positively in our education system. And there were some also really helpful wider discussions on tackling educational disadvantage. And I think in the context we're in today, it is worth noting that. And on that basis, I would just want to suggest, and maybe members to take this away to have a think, but we haven't really focused too strongly on our tackling educational underachievement and disadvantage element of our strategic priorities. We may have a little time after summer where we have a bit more scope to hear evidence, and there was real appetite in that room. Many academics, school leaders, practitioners who were really keen to engage with committee on sharing some really good practice and some really exciting research in this space. So I would hope that committee would be keen to engage on that, and it would be in my mind to suggest that perhaps a stakeholder event to really give those practitioners the opportunity to get some of that stuff out on the agenda. It was so often we focus on negatives around this committee and the challenges, but it was a genuinely unremittingly positive event focused around the positive ways that we can engage young people from disadvantaged communities and boys in particular, and as we see last night, they are often most likely to be caught up in some of these issues. So just I'll put that out there. That might be something I would to pick up if members are agreed after recess. We're agreed? Okay. Quick other items to run through, and then we will bring the Minister in. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations they wish to make in relation to today's agenda?
Just in case AI is mentioned, to note again, I sit on an AI ethics board outside of this position, just in case.
Thank you, that's noted.
There's a item of correspondence around Shimna Integrated College, and on that issue I've made representations for them. So.
No problem. And I note also, it probably will be for noting, there's an item of correspondence from Angel Eyes on the agenda, and my wife is an employee of that organisation. Item 4, matters arising. Just to note very briefly, with the Minister here in attendance today, he has now replied to the committee's initial concerns about industrial action over the teacher workload plan. So I would just draw that to members' attention in case that is an issue that is picked up in our briefing today. Item 5, draft minutes. Refer members to the draft minutes of our Education Committee meeting of the 3rd of June, and that's at page 8. Can I get agreement that those minutes are a complete and accurate record of proceedings? Is that agreed?
Right.
Agreed. Okay, so that takes us to item 6, and if we can bring our panel of witnesses through. So we have a briefing from the Education Minister and senior departmental officials. So I will refer members to the briefing note from the Clerk, which is at page 23. I think I put a staple through my briefing, but it's in there. The first item in item 6 in your packs. And then there are a range of other items which I won't go through in detail in relation to previous Hansard briefings, correspondence from the Minister, DE business plan, ministerial statements, whole range of material which I'm sure members have all had the opportunity to read. So I think at this point it probably makes sense to move straight into the briefing. So I'll just extend a welcome to the Minister of Education, Paul Given, and the officials joining us today. We have Sharon Smith, Deputy Secretary within the Department of Education, Paul Brush, Acting Deputy Secretary, Dr Suzanne Kingan, Acting Deputy Secretary, and Neil Palmer, the Finance Director, all within the Department of Education. First of all, to the Minister, thank you for your attendance. I know that you've come straight from an executive meeting, and your ability to honour the commitment to come to committee today is noted and appreciated, as we understand we're in a pretty fast moving situation in terms of the executive response to events of recent days. So at this stage, I open up for any initial briefing that you want to make. You have generously offered us a couple of hours of your time, so it's really to you how long you want to take over that initial briefing, but we would usually suggest up to 10 minutes. So over to you.
Okay, well listen, thank you Chairman, and just to provide an initial update, I think the executive, I left to come here, so it may still be ongoing, but I've dealt with education related issues, engaged with the Chief Constable and updated colleagues on a number of issues of concern that I have. But obviously, the circumstances that we've witnessed over the past 24 hours has understandably raised serious concerns within our schools and the wider community. And the violence that we had last night was appalling and should be condemned by everybody. So over the course of this morning, I've been engaging with the Education Authority, SEA, the PSNI, in order to provide advice to schools as they were seeking information. And as part of that engagement, that did then result in communication issuing to schools that we want schools to be able to continue as normal business as possible, recognising that there are some isolated, localised concerns, and that is an issue to engage directly with the PSNI in those communities, and I've raised issues around making sure that they can be contacted and principals have access to get advice from their local police district commanders, but that we want to have as many schools open as possible, and many parts of the province did not have protests and did not have disruption, and therefore a blanket approach would be disproportionate. It wouldn't be practical either to have taken that position, and I believe would have been counterproductive. One of the very important issues for many people, in addition to safety and welfare of our young people, our teachers, is also that there are many who are completing their A-level and GCSE exams, and so I engaged with SEA around that, and the exams are continuing as normal today. We engaged with SEA in order for communication to issue with our exam centres and to encourage those young people to come into school as early as possible in order to make sure that they continue with their exams. And I've no information to suggest that there has been any disruption to those exams being able to proceed. Of concern, and at this stage I don't have figures for the committee, but there is some anecdotal evidence of a decrease of pupil attendance today, particularly amongst newcomer population, and that is something that was reflected in previous occasions, and that obviously is something which will concern many people in terms of that information. Again, youth services within EA were stood up last night and have been engaging with young people in areas where there has been challenges and difficulty, and that continues to be the case, that the EA are working to try and provide as much support as possible, and obviously with the department in EA, where there are issues that emerge within a school context, we will be there to support those schools to manage those difficult situations. And just to add why it's important that we continue to operate. One, I don't believe we should ever allow those who engage in violence to win in our society. Closing down our schools would only encourage worse behaviour, and we should never cower to thugs that engage in this kind of behaviour. But that does have to be balanced with localised decision making and the safety and welfare of everybody involved. And that is a message that the Chief Constable again reiterated to me only in the past number of minutes. That is his message, that we want to try and continue as normal, and that is the position that we are taking whilst trying to navigate this carefully. But we also have children who are parents or first responders, And whenever those children aren't able to go to school or have to go home early, that is impacting on the ability of police officers and fire officers to be able to actually be engaged. So we need to be mindful of making sure that we don't have a snowball and a domino effect that can have then unintended consequences in terms of the impact on trying to manage this difficult position that we're facing. So that is just by way of an update, and I'm happy to take questions from members in due course in terms of how we're trying to navigate this difficult position. If you're content, Mr. Chairman, I'll just do my opening remarks then, and then I'm happy to hand over to you. So first of all, formally, let me say good afternoon to the members. Thank you for the opportunity to again before this committee today, and I'm going to provide an update on the key issues that are facing the department. And of course, it's always a pleasure to be here. In my opening remarks, I want to focus particularly on Transform Ed, funding and special educational needs. And I welcome this session because reform in education must begin with a shared, honest and evidence-informed understanding of where we are, the pressures that we face and what needs to change. So let me begin with the wider context. Education in Northern Ireland is under sustained and growing financial pressure. Today, over 70,000 children are registered as having special educational needs, and critically, nearly 32,000 children now have a statutory statement of SEN, and around 9% of the school population are SEN. 10 years ago, that figure stood at approximately 16,000 children. So this represents an increase of some 85% in just a decade. And the education budget is under substantial and unsustainable pressure as it seeks to keep pace with this level of demand. SEN expenditure has grown sharply now to over £700 million each year. In 2018, SEN expenditure represented 13% of the education budget. Now it's 21% of all spend. In parallel, we see rapidly increasing costs across school staffing, transport and school meals. An ever-growing number of schools are operating in a deficit position, and funding has simply not kept pace with demand. The budget has remained in balance only through significant in-year funding allocations, and we have relied on emergency funding and temporary measures simply to maintain day-to-day delivery across the education system, and that is neither financially sustainable nor a stable foundation for long-term improvement. But I also want to make another difficult point very clearly to the committee. Record levels of spending have not delivered the outcomes that too many children with special educational needs deserve. Despite very significant investment, the current system is under growing pressure, with demand rising faster than the system can effectively respond. And the evidence is increasingly clear. A substantial body of international research shows that over-reliance on one-to-one classroom assistance does not consistently deliver the best long-term outcomes for most children with SEN. And in too many cases, it can unintentionally reduce independence, limit peer interaction, and create dependency rather than building confidence and resilience. Critically, Northern Ireland's current model is increasingly out of step with more progressive, evidence-informed approaches that are being adopted elsewhere in the United Kingdom and in Ireland. We cannot simply continue to spend more money on a system which international evidence tells us is not working well enough for children. And that would not represent compassion for children, but it would actually represent cowardice on the part of decision makers. And we need to be honest about the fact that fundamental reform in how support is delivered is now necessary. That is exactly what the SEN reform agenda and the new enhanced support model are designed to achieve. The aim is to build a more flexible, evidence-informed and sustainable system which allows schools to respond more effectively to the needs of children. It is about moving towards earlier intervention, more specialist expertise, stronger multidisciplinary support and a highly trained workforce that feels equipped, valued and empowered. My department's 5-year budget strategy is rooted in that same principle, facing financial reality honestly and acting before pressures overwhelm the system entirely. And it is a roadmap to stabilise educational finances whilst protecting teaching and learning. And it is about protecting the classroom first, while reforming those areas where costs are rising fastest and outcomes are not improving sufficiently. And we face a choice. Either we bury our heads, close our eyes to the scale of the challenge, and continue pretending that limitless spending without reform is a sustainable answer. We can continue promising everything, reforming nothing and blaming others for our problems. Or we can work together and build a system that is financially sustainable, educationally stronger, and will deliver better outcomes for children. Equally, we must ask some very honest and uncomfortable questions about the performance of our education system. Northern Ireland has many strengths to build on, including highly skilled teachers, dedicated school leaders, strong school communities that are delivering exceptional work every day. But we cannot allow those strengths to blind us to the warning signs that are becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Too many outcomes remain inconsistent. Too many children's chances still depend on which school they attend. And when we look at the GCSE and A-level outcomes, we see substantial variation between schools with similar pupil intakes and levels of disadvantage, and that should concern us all. When we compare the controlled and maintained sectors, Catholic maintained schools consistently outperform controlled schools, even where levels of deprivation are broadly the same. And internationally, evidence also raises serious concerns. PISA, the OECD's comparing the skills and knowledge of 15-year-olds across the world, shows that Northern Ireland performs only around average at an international level when it comes to maths and science. And across all areas, our performance sits below England and the Republic of Ireland. Almost 30%, nearly 3 in every 10 young people, fail to achieve basic international level 2 competence in mathematics. In the highest performing systems such as Estonia, that proportion is closer to 15%. And countries that we once outperformed are now moving ahead of us. And our own key stage assessment data for 2025 tells a very similar story. Teachers judge that 28% of children are not meeting the expected standard in literacy and numeracy by the end of primary school. Again, almost 3 in every 10 children. Among children that are entitled to free school meals, the figures rises to almost half. We've also lacked robust system-wide measures for tracking progress at primary and key stage 3, alongside limited inspection evidence. And this has reduced our ability to identify underperformance early and to intervene effectively. That's why I believe protecting inspection is fundamentally important to our education system. Because inspection is not about naming and shaming schools or catching teachers out. It's about improvement. It's about identifying what works, challenging what's not working well, and ensuring every child in every classroom receives the high-quality education they deserve. And I hope, despite some of the contributions at the second stage of the debate, a way forward can be found on this inspection bill, which gives at least some consideration to the issue of children. Reform of education system is not optional, and it is essential, and that reform cannot happen in silos. Reform of service delivery and Transform Ed must go hand in hand. We cannot reform the curriculum while ignoring the financial and operational pressures overwhelming schools and support services. Equally, we cannot focus only on balancing budgets without confronting stagnation in educational outcomes and the need to improve standards for all children. Both of these challenges are interconnected, and long-term reform is needed across transport, school meals and on-send delivery. There must also be difficult but necessary conversations around the sustainability of the school estate, and yes, in some cases, school closures. But reform must also target the core pillars of educational effectiveness: curriculum, assessment, qualifications, tackling educational disadvantage and school improvement. It must be supported by sustained investment in teacher professional learning and leadership development. That means focusing relentlessly on what children are taught, how they are taught and how progress is measured. Transform Ed and my department's 5-year sustainability plan work together to provide a pathway that's better, fairer, more sustainable for the education system. And together they represent the most serious attempt in a generation that will align financial sustainability with educational reform and better outcomes for children. Mr. Chairman, none of these can be delivered by any minister acting alone. Lasting reform will require political honesty and also shared responsibility and that collective leadership. It requires grown-up conversations about the really important issues that's facing our education system. I'm not standing still because children that are being failed cannot afford to wait for reform. They only get one chance. And I draw the committee's attention today to what has already been achieved. Year 1 of Transform Ed was deliberately focused on investing in the teaching workforce and policy design, review and planning. The achievements, they are substantial. They include significant progress now having been made in improving teachers' pay, reflecting both the importance of the profession and the considerable responsibilities that teachers carry each day. Since February of 2024, the starting salary for teachers has increased by over a third to £32,916, with average teacher pay rising by almost £10,000. We have the largest expansion of professional learning in a generation, including the Teacher Professional Learning Fund, which provides £31 million of funding directly to schools on a per-teacher basis. We have new policy frameworks now for curriculum, assessment, qualification and professional learning. A clear evidence-based literacy framework that is supporting reading, writing and oracy. We have a new curriculum framework for initial teacher education, ensuring that every new teacher enters the classroom better prepared. We have new bursaries to strengthen recruitment in subjects with teacher shortages, expanded induction for newly qualified teachers. We have new system-level sample assessments in literacy and numeracy. And we've got real investment in tackling disadvantage through the RAISE programme. None of these are quick wins. They're about creating the platform on which sustained improvement is possible. And there's been some criticism about the scale and speed of change through Transform Ed. But one of the most important lessons that we've learned is that improving education cannot be done in a piecemeal fashion. So Transform Ed is deliberately different. It's about rebooting the entire policy framework together so that the different parts fit, they reinforce one another, and they create a coherent whole. Education reform is like a jigsaw. Each piece matters in its own right, but it is only when they are designed together and put together properly that they can see a clear picture. For the first time in a generation, we are aligning curriculum, assessment, qualifications and professional learning into a single coherent system. Of course, I understand that some stakeholders have concerns about pace and classroom impact. However, to assure them and members of the committee, reform is being paced, it's being phased and it will be crucially supported. It will be deliberately phased over several years. It'll be carefully managed so that that change is introduced in a measured and a sustainable way. So the year ahead will focus now relentlessly on delivery. And over the next year, what members will see is consultation on the new statutory curriculum and the new religious education syllabus, publication of pedagogical principles and curriculum guidance, development of high-quality curriculum resources, professional learning, and a digital platform to support delivery. Continued reform of assessment, including strengthened system-level checks that are designed to support learning. Work progressing on the new GCSEs and the A-level specifications. New leadership programmes for middle leaders, principals and system leaders. There will be further expansion of the professional learning and subject networks and the continued rollout of the RAISE programme and evaluation of its impact. This is also about recognising that the way we have organised improvement and support has not always served schools well. That's why these delivery commitments are underpinned by the creation of a new Centre for Educational Excellence and Improvement within the department. It's a new delivery structure that will sit at the heart of the system. And for too long, Northern Ireland has lacked investment and coherence in the middle tier. That connects policy intent with the classroom reality. And international evidence is unequivocal. Systems that succeed invest in the delivery infrastructure. The new centre will bring together curriculum design and support professional learning, leadership development and school improvement, coherently, transparently and at scale. So, Mr. Chairman, to conclude, ultimately this comes down to a very simple question. Do we believe that the current system is delivering consistently enough for all of our children and young people? Because if we're honest with ourselves, I believe that answer is no. Standing still is not a neutral option. If we do nothing, the pressures will continue to grow. The financial position will continue to deteriorate and the gaps in outcomes will continue to widen. That is why reform is necessary. Not reform driven by ideology, not reform for headlines, but reform that's driven by evidence, by honesty and by a determination to do better for all children. So reform is about raising standards. It's about strengthening equality and building a system that is financially sustainable as well as educationally ambitious. I believe Northern Ireland can have an education system that is among the very best internationally. But achieving that requires courage to confront the difficult truths, a willingness to challenge approaches that are no longer working, and a collective commitment to the long term. This will require partnership across schools, sectors, parents, delivery organisations, government, and this committee. So my message today is a simple one. Let us be honest about the challenges. Let us be ambitious about the future. And let us work together to build that education system which is stronger, fairer, more sustainable, and genuinely delivering for every child and young person in Northern Ireland. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to make those opening remarks, and I'm in your hands and happy to answer questions from members.
Thank you, Minister. Just for members' information, we'll be looking to keep members' contributions to the sort of the 10-minute mark, because we have got a longer session today with the Minister, so just to bear those timings in mind. I just want to pick up on the sort of live issues of the day, first of all, before we get into the wider points, Minister. I just wanted to ask, could you expand briefly on what support for a lot of families from ethnic minorities who'll be watching this, who may be very afraid around safe travel to and from school for their children, and pupils who will be feeling incredibly vulnerable at the minute? What support is in place in relation to your engagement with EA, TransLink and the PSNI around those safe journeys to and from school?
So there's a number of structures that exist to manage situations like this, and they have been stood up. There's the Community Safety Group, which is actually established through DOJ and the PSNI, and we participate in that. And there is the EPOC team as well that's working across a number of areas. And obviously then within EA, there is their youth services, but also engagement with the schools. So as issues arise and information comes to us that there are challenges, we will provide support to those schools. It'll be at a school level where they often will be identified. We will respond to that. So at this stage, in terms of, it's only anecdotal. I want to know what has been the impact in terms of attendance figures today. And the school leaders come forward to indicate if there's particular challenges in their school, then the EA will work with them to provide support. But that is multifaceted. It varies. It's not generic in that respect.
Absolutely understand that, and concur with your opening remarks that nobody wants to see those who are taking violence onto our streets dictating how we run our education system, but that has to be balanced with safety, and there will be families and young people feeling very, very vulnerable at the moment. On that basis, we've had direct contact with committee around the examination issue in particular, and I know that the decision's been taken to proceed with those. And this may be an emerging picture, but if we arrive in a scenario where any young person has been unable, due to threat of violence, to attend school to sit an exam, or they have been disrupted in terms of their housing situation and their ability to prepare for that exam, can we get assurances that provisions will be put in place to ensure that those young people are supported to still take those qualifications and don't have their entire year of education disrupted as a result of that unacceptable violence we saw last night, and which may continue? We hope it does not.
Well, I can give you an assurance. The answer to that is yes. Let me just preface some of the remarks. One, I'm not clear on what level of disruption yet has taken place this afternoon. And so once I leave the committee, I'll be seeking an update because the examination centres, there are pupils who will be currently sitting their exams. And I want to get an assessment as to how successful or otherwise that has been. Because what I don't want this is to continue on, and that's something which is a dynamic situation that we need to keep under assessment. But when I came into this meeting, my understanding was that every exam centre was proceeding and there hadn't been disruption. But that may not mean that there hasn't been individual students who have not been able to come and participate. And in my engagement with SIA this morning, I talked through what special circumstances there would be to mitigate in those positions, and there are special circumstances that would be able to mitigate where a student has not been able to attend an examination. So I will keep the committee informed as to how many are unable to sit their exams. I don't have that information. I'm hoping it is very small, but where we can provide special circumstances, there is a standard process, because this is something that can impact if in normal circumstances somebody loses their parent and there's a death. There are special circumstances that would mitigate when it comes to the qualification, and we would be able to facilitate that. What we don't want to have is a wholesale cancellation of the exam, because that would have a ripple effect that would impact on every single child. But it is right that we would have special circumstances for those individual pupils if they are adversely impacted.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, and appreciate the assurance to keep in touch with the committee, and obviously we can engage with SIA directly ourselves. I think there'll undoubtedly be other issues arising from the context we find ourselves in that other members may want to pick up. I wanted to move on to another issue in the system, and you have referenced it at various points in your briefing, and you've set out your programme for the department and your priorities and the reform agenda, and again we'll no doubt get into that in detail. But it seems to me, looking into the system, that we are at a point where industrial relations are once again at crisis point. There is no doubt that the pay deal that was achieved was welcomed almost across the board among teachers. It was a very welcome and long overdue settlement. But we are in a scenario again of strike action being balloted on, and the single issue that seems to be focused on is workload, which is I think driven by some of the concerns around the pace of change, which you have referenced, but also workload is not a new issue. This is a chronic issue in our system that has not been dealt with over many years. So my question really to start with is, what are you doing now tangibly in terms of interventions and resource? We are at a critical point. The system is extremely fragile, I would suggest. How are you going to address those issues around workload?
There's a number of points just in response to that, Chairman. The workload issue is not a new one. It's well documented. And it featured in previous industrial relations disputes around pay, and some of the decisions around pay was being informed in terms of the pressure and workload. So we were able to navigate the last 2 years of the pay cycle by separating out the workload issue, and when I met with the unions to try and reach an agreement in previous pay settlements, the establishment of the independent body was the process by which we would help define what it is the workload relates to, because even the trade unions have struggled to clearly specify what exactly is it that is the challenge when it comes to workload, and there is the totality of the pressure that is faced by school leaders and teachers. But then whenever you try and drill into what are the specific issues, that becomes harder to quantify. So that panel carried out its work. The trade unions all agreed on their representative that would be on that. And it went out and engaged and was able to crystallise that into its report, which was published. 27 recommendations are there, and the department formally responded to those 27 recommendations. I met with the trade unions because there was a point where the National Association of Head Teachers had went ahead of the other unions and indicated that they were in dispute with the department. So I've sat with the trade unions, all of their leadership team, my department, and those that represent the management side, the employing authorities, and we went through those recommendations. And we left that meeting, I thought, in a positive fashion, that we had a way through the workload-related matters. Obviously, that didn't transpire to be the case when the leadership of the trade unions went back to their committees, and they then responded the way that they have since that.
Can I ask then, on that basis, that the assessment that I would hear from the teaching unions would be that they felt that the department's response around the review was high level. It seemed to be a lot of things being kicked sort of down the road. There was no clear resource attached to a lot of the actions. A lot of the actions were highlighted as, well, it can't proceed without resource. Working groups being established, but not, again, that sense of there's been a long history of workload agreements being reached but not being implemented. I would put it to you that if we can't address this, the whole system is in a really precarious position. You can't deliver whatever anyone thinks about your agenda. You can't deliver any of it if we don't have teachers fully engaged in the classroom, and industrial relations are in that state. So what priority are you allocating to this? What specifically are you doing to now address in the very short window of time we have to get this right? And what resource are you allocating to get this sorted?
Well, listen, resource is always a challenge. It's well documented, the financial pressures. But having met with the unions and then the feedback coming back that there was an emerging issue with the umbrella group of the NITC, again, my team did meet with them, led by the Permanent Secretary, the management side. We engaged, and they've proceeded to go down this route. Now, I'm not breaking any confidence to say the trade unions don't all share the same position, because there's different views within the school system. School leaders will have a view as to some of those recommendations and how it would impact upon them in terms of delivery of the environment engaging with teachers. So it is not a universal picture, and it is more nuanced. And I don't believe all of the 5 trade unions would have went into a industrial dispute.
That's the reality of where we are.
Yes. So, but I raise that because it demonstrates the difficulty in trying to get agreement across even all 5 trade unions as to what exactly is the solution to allow us to make progress, because it is more nuanced and there is not a universal issue when you drill down into the specific aspects of workload. So just to update members, obviously the ballot is out until the 1st of September. That means there is still opportunity to try and get agreement on this that would avoid industrial action. We have now formally engaged the Labour Relations Agency, and the Labour Relations Agency have agreed to get involved with the department and the management side and the trade unions in order to try and find and facilitate a reconciliation around these issues. That will necessitate my department, the management side, engaging with them to outline here's what we believe is the way forward, and it'll also require the trade unions to engage with the LRA to be very specific about what the issues are, and we will seek through that mediation to try and reach a resolution. So I am very much of a view we have an opportunity to engage positively around this, to try and get an agreement that would avoid industrial action. I think all of us want to get to that place. So hopefully we can get the encouragement that's needed for people to engage in good faith. On my part, I absolutely will.
I hope that is the case. I think certainly the feedback from trade unions is that there seems to be a real sense that this feels intractable, but I sincerely hope we can avoid that outcome. One specific thing on workload, I brought a motion to the floor with my party colleagues on Senko workload. If you engage with any section of the teaching workforce, I would say they are almost without exception overwhelmed and demoralised, while at the same time retaining a profound and I think very impressive levels of commitment to the children and young people that they look out for in their schools every single day. They feel intense frustration that their role has become hugely administrative and bureaucratic, and they do not share the assessment of the EA that the current reform agenda is reducing their workload. Their experience is that it is increasing it, and I have no reason to take their assessment of that in anything other than good faith, because these are dedicated professionals, often doing the job simply because they know there's no one else in the school would pick it up given the level of workload, so they continue to do it out of commitment to the children. But yet you've responded to me in a written question saying you're not going to review the workload. You're not going to review Senko workload, and that somehow the SEN reform agenda is going to just work this process out. I think Senkos that I have communicated with, both in my local constituency and more widely, were profoundly disappointed with that response. What can you say to Senkos who are critical in delivering SEN reform that you have their back and that you are going to address this issue, because I can't see how you progress the agenda without them?
Well, I've met with Senkos in my own constituency and in this role, and I've been encouraged by some of the engagement that I've had, because they recognise the reform will assist. It may not necessarily be universally held. For those who are engaging, though, in this reform, it is going to make a tangible benefit to them.
If I could just correct you, I mean, Senkos are are engaging in the reform. I mean, that's
Yes,
their
yeah.
job. They have to every single day. I have not heard a single Senko saying we don't need to change the system.
Yeah.
What they're saying is that the burdens being placed on them are hugely administrative and bureaucratic.
Yeah.
They have
I
no
agree.
time to interact with children. They're pushing paper around,
Yeah.
and that's not
I agree.
surely how we should be fulfilling that role.
I agree with them. I agree with the administrative burden in terms of what's been placed on them, and the I was going to say timeliness, but it's not timely in the way in which EA engage with our schools when it comes to assessments, and they're not responsive enough whenever it comes to those assessments. So I don't have any dispute with what Senkos are saying, but we do need to work through the reform programme in order to get the light at the end of the tunnel in all of this. One of the proposals, which isn't in the 27 recommendations, which we have added to in recognition of the administrative burden that's being placed upon schools when it comes to the special educational needs, is to seek to make provision for general administrative support in schools in order to release Senkos, school leaders, from a lot of that administrative paperwork, some of which does need to be carried out, but doesn't need to be carried out by the school leader or by the teacher whenever they're best placed to actually teach. So that was not in the 27 recommendations. But we have said that we see a problem. We want to provide greater support directly to schools to free them up in terms of providing general administrative support. But part of that requires the enhanced model to be implemented because there is no more money coming into education. But it's how do we better spend that 700 million that is being spent, and how do we repurpose that in order to help alleviate some of these pressures? Paul may be able to add a little bit more on the transformation if that's going to be helpful, but I hear it. I want to see the changes. I believe we do have a way that will help improve the circumstances.
I think I'll leave that issue there simply in the interest of time, because I know other members will be very keen to come in. I just want to put on record that I have been nothing other than impressed by my engagement with Senkos, and I think if we cannot resolve this issue, and I think it is, yes, we can be critical of the EA and their engagement and the timeliness of their responses, and this committee is regularly returns to those themes, but ultimately I would put it to you, Minister, that this is an essential element of SEN reform. There's a much wider system issues. If we don't have Senkos carrying out those rules, we cannot deliver the system, and I am really concerned that we are asleep at the wheel on this, that there is a sense that it'll work itself out. I don't think that's good enough, and I think we need to be clear. It would have been good to see that extra allocation of resource specifically referencing Senkos. I think they were hoping that would come, that there would be specific support for them. They didn't hear that, and I think they remain to be convinced, so we will watch this space. I want to return to one other issue on SEN, and then I'll bring other members in. I think other members will no doubt want to engage on the whole wider reform picture, but I want to talk about one element of this that I think just runs through the whole issue of SEN, whatever your approach is, and that is placements. I am concerned we remain in a scenario where we are not placing children with special educational needs appropriately, in a timely way, in a way that feels planned, strategic, and in a way that feels in any way appropriate for parents in terms of how they engage with the system, or indeed for schools who are managing that process. So I want to ask you the question, first of all, can you give us an update on how many children with special educational needs currently in a transition year remain unplaced for September?
The process replacement.
So just the number, if you've got that.
Yes, I do. There is a forecast pressure of around 180 pupils needing to have a placement provided in September. That is still an unacceptable figure, but I do contrast it with last year and the year before, and that is an improving picture than what we've had. But for those individual families, that uncertainty is still difficult.
I would respond to that to say, and I mean, we're always welcome if the numbers are lower, but this is not just a numbers game.
Yeah.
This is about parents' experience and schools' experience. I am still hearing feedback from principals who contact me regularly, who use terms that they do not like, but they have to use the terms that characterise the process, and the phrase that is regularly used is, "This feels like horse trading."
Well,
that EA comes in to say, well, if you take that child, we'll not ask you to take that one, and look, there's 10 here, look, give us 8 and we'll work with you. That's not an appropriate way to place children with special educational needs, and that is not me passing comment on the professionalism of EA staff. It is my comment on a system that is absolutely in crisis in relation to placements. So I want to really ask, what commitment can you give committee that we're going to see placements move into a strategic, planned approach that reflects more an area planning type approach in terms of where we make those places available and assuring on the appropriateness of placement? Because I'm not seeing, the numbers may be down, the process doesn't feel different.
Well, so the process, take it from the high level. We have mapped out the special educational needs provision that is required in Northern Ireland for the next 10 years. We've identified all 39 special schools as to how we can enhance those schools, how we can provide additional capacity, and we're doing that. And I've put bids into the department, and I met the Minister for Finance only as recently as last week to go through the capital allocation that's required to provide an improvement to the physical school infrastructure. So that is the physical increased capacity that we need. But there will be an increasing requirement for mainstream settings to accommodate specialist provision, because we all want to have children being educated in the same school as their siblings. And so over the past number of years, we have increased that capacity. There has been clear engagement with schools. I personally have intervened and asked schools to engage with EA, because not every school will even have that conversation. But we've also helped empower principals who are providing specialist provision for them to engage with their peers to provide the assurance that actually this does work. You don't take the word of EA, don't take the word of the department, but here's how it has worked in my school, and you can have confidence to go through this process of providing specialist provision. So there has been additional capacity established over the past 3 years. There is a better process that does reflect that the figures are not as high at this point in the year. But what I would also say that if we were to, if the statementing process, so this is a forecast pressure. So there are children currently who do not have a statement of educational need. They are not yet been specified that they require specialist provision. And if you had an arbitrary cut-off date in the allocation to schools, you would then be allocating children to schools in September because they don't have a statement of need yet to a school that wouldn't be suitable. And so therefore, the number of the pressure of the forecast is different to the figure for today. The number of children with an actual statement that have a required need in September will be lower than that.
The system needs flex. I absolutely understand that, but there seems to me to have been a blockage over many years, which has not improved as far as I can see under your tenure, around a more planned approach, which is where we know in terms of area planning for mainstream places what the likely demographics are and the number of pupils that will be needed at each year group in an area in different sectors. But we also largely understand that for special educational needs. We understand the trajectory of growth in need. We understand where the areas, where the particular pressures are. But yet we continue to bus children in my constituency from Newton Ards to Portaferry to access a SPIM. Mm-hmm. How is that a planned approach to placements?
Well, if you're going to have a planned approach, which I've outlined, this is the framework by which you would do it. I have requested, and the paper now has been updated to go to the executive on the back of my meeting with the Minister for Finance, deliberate earmarked funding of £70 million per annum, which is additional to the general allocation. But you can't on the one hand ask for planned development of capital programmes to help build the capacity if then we don't actually receive that financial allocation. So how do you move from proactive planning to the reactive position that we have been in, and we are standing up provision because there isn't that level of planned spend that is needed? So I would appeal to the committee, help me secure the additional funding that is needed to give the protection that is required for those specialist provisions. With that protected funding, then we can allow that proactive framework to be implemented. If we don't have that, then you are going to be having to react. So I would appeal to the committee, help me to secure the funding that I need to enable that long-term financial planning that is necessary. But what I can say in the short term, the reactive process is being operated in a better way than previous years. The engagement with the schools, proactively identifying areas where there is need, working with those principals, having EA engage with them and identifying how we can provide specialist support is better than where it was. So I inherited a problem. I have sought to address it through a long-term plan. I have improved the short-term interventions. But this isn't something that sits in isolation with the department or indeed EA, and that's why I have appealed to colleagues around this table. Help me within your constituencies When you have a school that says, I'm refusing to engage, even just engage in the process, help me to get them over the line to actually, I'll open up my opportunity to engage with EA. If people aren't prepared to talk, then it's very difficult to bring them across.
I have those conversations in my constituency. I think for me that the challenge around this is not just financial. Of course there are financial challenges. I do not underestimate the financial pressures that you face in carrying out this role. But I'll give you an example. I was out at Oakwood Special School satellite site in Saintfield, and they are flagging major concerns around their cohort who are going to be leaving it at age 8 very shortly. But they're also flagging that they have a building next to their school that was run by a previous non-statutory preschool provision that they're saying really needs a lick of paint, and they could have that open to be accepting P1 places. I get a response back from the department saying, yes, all of that's in progress. And you speak to the school, they say, we've had no update. We don't know anything about this process. We're waiting to hear when this is going to be open. You have parents waiting to hear if their child's going to be placed in that school. So that's not about finance. That's about a system where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, and that can't be an acceptable way to run it. So I will leave it at that. But, it doesn't take money to communicate.
I agree with you.
So I think I will leave
the communication's key, if that's not happening, it should be.
It is, and that lack of communication puts school leaders under pressure, and it puts parents under pressure. So I think we get the little things right, and sometimes some of those other issues may well resolve themselves. I'll leave it at that stage. I'll pass over to the Deputy Chair and then look for indications from other members. So
thanks, Chair. Minister, last week I visited Sand Mills Primary School. I got a great welcome from the principal, the staff, the pupils. In fact, I was extremely impressed with the students. But it's a school with a number of problems, quite serious problems. You were invited to visit it last September the 6th, and you pulled out of that some hours beforehand. The school had commissioned a plaque to the fact that they had relaunched the school as an integrated school. There was a plaque with your name on it as having been involved in the relaunch, and of course the pupils, the children, had been getting primed for your visit, and to say they were disappointed would be an understatement. There's water pouring through the roof of that school in a number of areas. The corridors and hallways are littered with basins and buckets. It's only a matter of time before some child, in attempting to navigate the obstacles, falls and hurts themselves, or slips in a puddle of water and cracks their skull or something like that. And given the fact that you have expressed concerns about child safeguarding and child safety, I would encourage you to visit that school and look at the problems, because they have been going on a long time. You just have to look at the school to begin with. The roof is covered with moss. There are obviously tiles broken, or the lead flashing is damaged in some way. And the longer that is left, the greater the problem is going to be. There's going to be rotten roof trusses or joists or whatever, and it's going to cost more money in the long run. But it's no environment for children to be learning in anyway. No child should be in a school with the water flying through the roof and into the hallways and into the classroom. It's unacceptable, and I would encourage you to visit that school at the earliest possible opportunity, preferably before the summer holidays. There's no question there. On the 23rd of March, in the Assembly, you were asked if you had ever been accused of bullying in the department, and you gave an emphatic answer, no. And that turned out not to be true. So, can you tell us what part of your conduct gave rise to an allegation of bullying?
So I responded to that because there was no specific question, and I challenged actually yourself and other members who were raising it to be specific.
You were asked, had you ever been the subject of an allegation of bullying, and you said no.
I said,
are you saying there are other allegations?
No, I said give me the specifics, and your members didn't do that.
Have there been other allegations?
Listen, I'll answer the question. If the committee wants to litigate out an issue around HR related issues, that's a matter for the committee. I will answer questions because I have nothing to hide in respect of this matter, but it is a matter for the committee as to how much level of detail they want to go into, but I certainly will not obfuscate in any question that gets answered. What I will say, I responded, I provided information by way of a written statement, I made it clear, and whenever you refer to an allegation, anybody can make an allegation. Anybody can make an allegation. I'm sure you've had allegations made against you. So people can make allegations.
Many allegations of bullying have been made against you within the department.
The question always is, was it substantiated? And categorically, this was not substantiated in any shape or form. And indeed, as I've said, the allegation was made some 9 months after the individual was no longer in the department and had been subject to other investigations that were taking place within the civil service. So if members wish to go down into the detail of this, you should be having the head of the civil service here. You should be having the head of the departmental solicitor's office here in order to provide you advice, because I am constrained legally as to the level of information that I can provide. But what I can say is I acted always with integrity in every single issue, and in terms of any investigation, it was found that I had acted appropriately and there was no findings whatsoever to substantiate the allegation. There are many more questions to be asked of other individuals that were associated with that than me, and I as Minister made sure that all of my actions were the interests of the department.
The allegations made by the Permanent Secretary?
If you want to go into specific issues, I would say to this committee, you need to bring Jane Brady here, you need to bring the Departmental Solicitor's Office legal professional here, and they will be able to provide you with those answers.
I'm asking you,
those
because
answers.
You were the subject of the allegation. Were there concerns raised during the review from officials within the department that they were unable to speak openly or were afraid to challenge you?
Well, again, you would need to ask Jane Brady to release the review. My position on this is in public record. I have said, total transparency, publish the report that was commissioned by the head of the civil service, have it wholly unredacted so that people can actually see that information. Otherwise, what members will do...
but you're saying that, Paul, in the knowledge that Jane Brady was never going to publish that.
No.
And I'm asking
Sorry,
you...
I'm saying it in the knowledge...
Did the Permanent Secretary make the allegations of bullying?
I am saying that publish it in full, because I know you will find that there was nothing at fault on my part and people will actually be able to see all of this. Okay. That's why I'm saying publish it, not because I don't think Jane Brady won't publish it. I've said Jane Brady should publish it.
Did you ask the Permanent Secretary to promote another official within your department?
With respect, Mr. Sheehan, your line of questioning is entirely inappropriate for you to be getting involved in these kinds of questions. You've already put out a statement at this committee that my officials, ultimately, you've referred to them as a bunch of liars as to why you should believe them.
It's totally inaccurate.
It isn't inaccurate. It is a summation of what you said. When my officials came, you said that they come here, they do not tell you responses because they're here to do the minister's bidding, not just in this committee, but in other committees.
The Permanent Secretary to promote another official within your department to a more senior position?
With respect, Mr. Sheehan.
Minister, if I could just come in, and John asked that again, any remarks through the chair.
Thank you, Chair.
I think ultimately it's for members to ask the questions they choose, and it's for any witness, including the Minister appearing before us, to choose whether it is appropriate to answer that question or not. So it is entirely in the hands of the questioner and the witness.
Well, with respect, Mr. Chairman, you're responsible for the conduct of your members on this committee. You cannot wash your hands of a member's behaviour, which I believe is completely out with what is reasonable to be asking on sensitive issues.
Deputy Chair, if I could just come in, because the Minister's just questioning how I'm conducting the meeting. It's not my rule to censor members. If a question is out of order, I will make that decision. I think in this scenario, given the seniority of your role, It's entirely up to you whether you choose to answer the question or not. And if you choose not to, that is entirely for you.
Chair, could I just say, Chair, the Minister has answered the question. The Minister has made
Excuse
clear...
me a second, Chair. I just want to make sure that my time is stopped.
No, it'll be...
Interventions are
The
being
Minister has made clear that there are legal considerations here which constrain the level of answer that he can give.
Yeah,
the member has continued to ask the same question, so there is a role for the Chair in stepping in there.
I think
there is a role that means to be chaired as well.
David, I am chairing the meeting, and it is for the Minister to choose if he wants to answer the question or not. So
he's answered the question.
I'll ask the Deputy Chair to come back in, and if the Minister is deciding he's not going to answer the question, we may move on to the next line of inquiry.
I have answered the question, but what legal advice has the committee taken in order to facilitate the line of questioning that Mr. Sheehan has taken? What advice, Mr. Chairman, have you taken? And the legal advice that has been provided by your clerk to this committee?
Doesn't have to take legal advice.
So
you have not taken any advice as a committee to get involved in what are HR personnel issues.
Minister,
you have not taken advice.
Okay,
the Deputy Chair hasn't provided a briefing to committee in terms of his line of questioning, so it is
You're deeming them appropriate.
It is for him to decide if he wants to follow that line, and for you to decide if it's appropriate to answer. If it's covered by any matters that are legally privileged, you simply need to state that, and we can move on.
I have answered the question.
I think it's quite straightforward. If you didn't ask the Permanent Secretary to promote another official within your department, a more senior position, all you have to say is no, I didn't do that.
Shane, so whether I answer that question in the affirmative or the negative, I'll tell you what that does. It means you can ask me any question about any issue in terms of staffing matters within my department. That is why I'm not going to answer that particular question, because it's wholly inappropriate for members of this committee to be delving into what are personnel matters, members of staff of the civil service. That is not in order. Okay. What is in order is for me to have said to you categorically that I did not act in any way that I was found to be at fault.
You're not going to answer that question.
No, I did answer it. I did answer it, but it's notable at a time when we're facing a £600 million deficit, a pressure in our education system that is unparalleled. You're pursuing a line of questioning of this nature. I think that is telling about the motivation on your part.
Just one more question on that. In terms of the allegation of bullying that was made against you, was it alleged there was a sectarian element to that?
Respect, Mr. Sheehan, I have said publish the report, because what you will find in that report...
Oh, Jane Brady isn't going to publish it, and that's why you're saying that?
Well, sorry, it is her report that she commissioned. So it is not my report. I don't have the report. What I have been given, though, is a readout, and that readout has made it clear categorically any allegations that were made were dismissed.
Okay.
So people can make whatever allegations they want. It is the ability to substantiate them, and having went through that process, it was found that I acted appropriately at all times. So whenever you put it into the public domain around allegations, what you should then follow up and say, the Minister has actually said that he was found not to have acted in a way that was inappropriate. That is the findings. That's what matters, but it doesn't suit your narrative for you to put that in the public domain.
Okay, fair enough. So you're not going to answer any of the questions?
No, I've answered it categorically in a way, though, that you don't like.
I get that. You're not answering the questions. So moving on, can you tell me why you and the rest of your party have opposed my private members' bill on an Irish medium workforce plan?
Well, because we don't think it's necessary. Because I actually am delivering on the Irish medium when it comes to the workforce plan. So the basis of opposition isn't because we are fundamentally opposed in principle to helping develop the Irish medium and addressing workforce issues. We are. Your legislation isn't necessary. Legislation is necessary if you feel that we weren't doing that. We actually are doing it, and we're doing it very effectively. So that's why we're opposing it, not on the basis of having a principal opposition to it.
So you're relying heavily on the strategy that won't even be ready until after the end of this mandate. And tell me this, how many meetings of the strategy working group have you attended?
Well, the strategy working group is being taken forward at my direction. So I don't attend every meeting that takes place in terms of the working groups. I haven't attended any working group to do with curriculum, for example. That is, the Minister appoints a strategy team, it appoints people to it. So that's
the answer is none.
So the question, though, Mr. Sheehan, is Am I waiting on a strategy to actually take forward the needs of the Irish medium? No, I'm not. I'm actually getting on with helping the Irish medium sector. I'm not waiting on a strategy document. That'll be important. It's important that we get that right. But if we were to wait for that strategy, we actually wouldn't then be taking forward a number of the initiatives that we have done to support Irish medium.
Did you not say at the last Transform Ed conference that the department is full of strategies that are gathering dust on the shelf?
This would just be final response on this, and we'll move on.
Oh,
No, you didn't.
I don't.
Well, okay. You actually did say it. You did say it.
Sorry.
Okay. So let me put it.
Let me say this, Mr. Sheehan. I
One
invited you.
question, yeah.
I'm happy to continue, but I invited you to come to the Transform Ed conferences. I invited every single member of this committee to come. Did you come?
I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the question that I asked you.
It's interesting
Don't be
though.
deflecting.
You're actually asking about something that I said when you weren't even there to
Don't
say
be
it.
deflecting because
Deputy
a number
Chair,
of people reported back to me.
Deputy
Now
Chair,
let me
you want a
put this
final
to you.
question? It would be a final
Let me
question.
put this
If
to
I
you.
said that, you have mischaracterised it and applied it to an Irish medium strategy that I, as Minister, have proactively established. I have appointed people to, and I'm taking forward, but I'm not waiting on the
Deputy Chair,
strategy to
Minister,
deliver.
Give him a chance to get in.
Deputy Chair, Minister, so I think that Deputy Chair has a final question. His time was interrupted by myself and another member intervening, so I'm content to have a final question, and then we'll close this session.
I'm going to put this to you. That the reason you and the DUP are opposed to my private members bill is because you're totally hostile to the Irish language, to the Irish culture, and anything connected with Irish. So we had Sammy Wilson talking about the Irish language as a leprechaun language. We had Michelle McElveen rename the fisheries boat from the Irish to English. Gregory Campbell gave us the disgusting curry my yogurt in the chamber. You stopped the LEAFA bursaries. DUP ministers have removed bilingual
Get to the
language
question,
from
Deputy Chair.
headed
If we could get to
paper.
the question, Deputy Chair.
And your friend Gordon Lyons has joined court cases against Irish language policy and Irish language signage, dual language signage in Grand Central Station. So
Still waiting for the question here.
after all that, are you going to sit there and gaslight this committee and tell me the DUP isn't hostile to the Irish language?
It's a very long preamble, so I'll ask for a brief answer.
But plenty of evidence, Chair.
It's the election script, because this is the default for Sinn Féin. When you can't actually say to your voters what you've been able to achieve by being in government, you go back to the politics of grievance.
So deflection.
So let me
deflection.
Well, I didn't interrupt the approach that you took to pitch
interrupt
this
me
the way that you did.
since I started asking you questions.
No, I let you ask the one on
we
Irish.
really are running
Well,
short of
sorry,
time here.
with
so
respect,
I'll ask
Mr.
her
Chairman,
yes,
the Vice Chairman was given well
yes,
over a minute to complete his party political broadcast.
So the Deputy
So
Chair,
I trust he'll be able to respond.
Deputy Chair, if I could ask that you would not interrupt the Minister as he attempts to answer your question, if I could ask that your response be brief.
On the Irish language strategy that my minister is taking forward, I have responded comprehensively. Do you know what department hasn't responded at all, which came out in the court case? The Department for the Economy. Oh. So when Sinn Féin talk about actually assisting in the development of it, why is your own Sinn Féin minister not actually
stick to your own
responded?
department?
So,
Deputy Chair, I think we
good
do have to
question.
give the Minister the opportunity to
Here's
respond.
what I have delivered for the Irish medium, and hopefully I'll get the time to do it. I think it's important. I have provided an additional 2.75 million to Irish medium schools and units last year, and an additional 2.9 million this year. I've increased Irish Medium Education Accommodation Fund by 2.4 million. I've invested in 4 Irish medium primary schools with an estimated cost in excess of 13.2 million. I've introduced Irish medium teacher bursary schemes. I've supported 43 early year settings and almost 1,000 funded preschool places. I've announced 472,000 for Irish medium early years funding. I've provided £300,000 to Irish medium youth provision. I've invested £100,000 to continue School Sprocket scheme. I've appointed the Irish medium primary principal to act as the lead educational advisor on curriculum reform, the first role of its type in the department. I've supported research-informed conferences on immersion pedagogy and Irish language oracy via the Making Best Practice Common Practice. I've provided funding to Irish medium schools for teacher professional learning. I've piloted Irish medium numeracy assessments, and in the near future I'll be commencing work to develop bespoke curriculum curriculum strands for Irish medium. I'll be rolling out specific Irish medium resources and professional development pieces on phonics, oracy, biliteracy as part of the Transform Ed Development Days, and I'm commencing work on an Irish medium literacy framework. And beyond that, over the last 10 years, we've invested over £24 million in minor capital projects and over 36 million. I say my support for Irish medium is in stark contrast when Sinn Féin held this department. So I will not be lectured about being anti-Irish when the record that I have actually demonstrates very clear, tangible support. But that doesn't suit the political narrative to culturally weaponise Irish language in advance of this election. That's what Mr. Sheehan's about.
Agreed.
Thank you,
Good
Minister.
man, Paul. The
Good
champion of Irish medium
Deputy Chair,
education.
I'm going to bring
That's a new one.
Deputy Chair, I'm going to bring the next member in. Before I do that, I will just suggest at this time, if this evidence session is characterised by long preambles, by interruptions from other members, not through the chair, and witnesses and members talking over each other, we're not going to make very much progress. So I would ask for members to work with me in terms of conducting this meeting in an orderly fashion. And I would also emphasise that I think a lot of parents and a lot of teachers watch this committee, and they will be wanting to see us conduct this in an appropriate and respectful manner. So I would hope that we could continue in that vein. John, you're the next member who'd indicate.
Thank you. I think people will be in despair that the opportunity to hold a minister to account and ask questions about the well-being, the workload of our teachers and the quality of education of our staff was used in a party political point scoring manner by Mr. Sheehan. But we'll move on. Minister, there's a couple of issues I want to discuss. The first is around, it's principally around the workload and safety and well-being of our of our teachers. And I want to split that into two issues. The first, I want to deal with the issue of bullying in our school and the proposal by some members in this room to change the minimum age of criminal responsibility. Then I'll look at workload. We heard devastating and compelling evidence from Sally Rees, and I've heard it from teachers up and down the country and female pupils, that they are facing extreme misogyny. I have female teachers telling me that they have been indecently assaulted, upskirted, downbloused, threats to rape, physically assaulted. Under the proposals brought by the Alliance Party, supported by the SDLP and Sinn Féin, any child less than 14 could not be held to any form of criminal accountability for any of those offences, including up to GBH with intent on a school teacher. In your view, are our schools going to be safer or less safe if that was passed?
Well, I'm clear it'll be less safe because the points that you have made, unfortunately, are well documented in terms of the pressures that we exist within our schools. And nobody wants to have a young person with a criminal conviction. Nobody wants to have that. And we engage in seeking to address those matters around discipline and behaviour. And part of that includes access to the Youth Justice Agency, because it could lead to a potential criminal conviction for 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds. And in order to avoid that, we engage with organisations like the Youth Justice Agency. Nowhere in this bill, in removing and changing it, has there been other support to be provided to the education system. So it is entirely irresponsible to bring forward changes on that issue without also then providing what would be the alternative support in order to help assist our schools. So I am unequivocal in terms of my view that this would undermine the deterrent value which exists to help remain good order in our schools, but it also would remove the ability of those criminal justice agencies like the Youth Justice Agency to be involved, because if it is no longer a potential criminal matter, they have no remit to be involved, and those who have proposed this change have not came forward with any other alternative support. So I have said, and I will speak on this issue in the Assembly on Monday, this should be dealt with in a separate standalone bill, not an amendment. Let it be properly considered across the departments, consulted upon, and go through a legislative process. So I am concerned. And I'm also concerned, and it's beyond the education remit, but we know whenever there are difficulties out there on the streets, which have happened last night, older people use young people to get involved in violence. Mm-hmm. Imagine if the criminal age of responsibility went to 16. Unbelievably supported by the Children's Commissioner. Imagine the exploitation that would take place even more so than already, if that was to be the case. I think we should seriously reflect on what's been proposed in terms of that change, particularly in light of the last 24 hours. But separate to that, as a school perspective, this will be counterproductive.
Thanks. And I've no confidence. The Children's Commissioner, he told me himself he believed in criminal responsibility of 16 with no exceptions, and that includes that if a 15-and-a-half-year-old actually murdered people, that the police should not be able to touch them, and that included rape. I'm deeply concerned about this because I think it sends the entirely wrong signal to say to a female teacher or pupil, and these are difficult issues, that literally being upskirted or downbloused or indecently assaulted is not a crime. And there is a deterrent factor in that. I just put on the record, I've been dealing with youth justice for the last 25 years. Very few young people are actually prosecuted. They're dealt with in a very rehabilitative way. But I think this is the most dangerous piece of legislation that this Assembly will pass if it does so. And I agree with the Minister, it shouldn't be done through an amendment, but through a proper youth justice bill. I just want to move on to teacher workload. First of all, let me deal with the issue of SENCOs. Vital role, SENCOs. The consistent clarion message I get from schools up and down the country is the SENCO should be a full-time role, and if they choose not to be teaching, that should be supported, that they should be dedicated entirely to coordinating the special education needs provision. Do you agree that should be a specialist role in itself?
I'm not sure. Well, I'm not sure every teacher who is a SENCO would believe that it shouldn't be led by an educationalist as a teacher. But I've also heard the position put forward around having a general individual within the school that can purely focus on all of that SENCO-related work, carrying out the assessments, engaging with EA. So I'm not clear as to what the best approach would be because I have had mixed views on it. That's why we're wanting to provide general administrative support to a school that could be utilised by the whole school, including by SENCO. So you would still retain the teaching-led element, but you would assist them in the administrative functions that the school is dealing with. So I don't have a clear view on what the best approach is. I only just reflect on that observation.
Second one around workload. Am I right in saying your briefing suggests that the academic year might be extended beyond the current 195 days?
No, that isn't.
I was asked by a teacher and I wanted to clarify that. That's absolutely not the case.
No, obviously there's a legal requirement of what we do have, but there are baker days and that facilitates additional training. But there is no proposal to increase the number of days in school. Parents may support that. I'm not sure school children would.
Okay. The next question in terms of bureaucracy, head teachers tell me that they actually dread a couple of days in the week when they say they get an email dump from the Education Authority, and that they spend time that they should. Many of our head teachers actually are also teaching. They spend time disaggregating the email dump and then deciding how that should be distributed amongst their staff. If someone could do that centrally, it would literally save hours of work from a principal, who's then that's been replicated across our. Could you give a commitment that could be done?
Well, that is part of the reason why we want to provide resource to a school to assist with general administration. It is an issue that the NAHT has specifically raised around that kind of administrative pressure that exists on school principals, who we want to focus on that teacher professional learning, curriculum, the pupils, but often so much of their time is spent on these administrative functions. So the answer is yes, I do want to be able to provide that. It is part of the reason why we need to reform the way in which we support schools. And it's also why we've taken forward a new AI approach to help when it comes to administrative functions, because we tested this with a number of principals. We engaged with Microsoft around the Copilot technology. A number of principals relayed that it had significant benefits in reducing the administrative workload that they have, and we have now entered into an agreement to move that forward, to expand the opportunity that exists when it comes to the administrative support in our schools. So both in practical support through AI technology that can be harnessed where it is appropriate, but also it is part of our reform plan to provide that extra general administrative support to a school. But that is about repurposing funding, because unless there's new money coming to education, and I don't believe there is, and we need to close the deficit that already exists, we have to then reform the way in which we do things for it to be enabling for this kind of support to be provided to schools.
Okay, the next one is on this is called the NISTER system for getting sub teachers. Now I sit with head teachers in their office, and they say to me, "Look, I'll actually show you. If I try and book a sub teacher, a list of names will come up, and there's insufficient sub teachers as it is. They struggle to get them, and then when they contact that sub teacher is actually already working in another school and they've been booked, but the headmaster has not done it through the system, has done it directly. I'm hearing that in school after school. Is there something that can be done that just says to principals, you cannot do this? Because you're then affecting the ability of other principals to get an accurate update of who's available.
In terms of how they process the NISTER system?
They seem to be bypassing it and going direct to sub-teachers. And I've heard this from perhaps a dozen schools, that when they ring someone who is shown available, they say, oh no, I got a direct call, and therefore the system's not accurate.
Let me come back to the member specifically on that, just to establish what is the process. Obviously, NISTER is the normal way in which you get substitute teachers coming in. That is not to say that the approach that you've outlined, John, isn't happening in terms of reaching out to sub teachers. There are other issues connected to that which we have raised with EA, and issues around teachers who have retired and the school going back to the same retired teacher, as opposed to other teachers. I can understand why you would do that. They know the school, they know the pupils, and if they're retired, can you bring them in? But it also has an impact on the ability for people who maybe are wanting to get into the profession and get greater opportunity. So there are other connected issues associated with how substitute teachers are being brought in, but I don't have a specific answer to that question.
I think that's an appropriate place to draw a line there in terms of our time.
That's one final question.
Well, it would need to be a brief comment, because we're needing to move on to the next member.
Just in terms of teacher assaults, I'm hearing a lot about teachers being injured, assaulted in the workplace. Now, some of this is dysregulated children, and I think that's a totally different category. But in terms of the behaviour of some pupils, I think a lot of it's driven by phones and social media. I think there's some issues for parenting.
Had indicated time was up, so it was a sort of
very,
final comment.
very, very short.
Was all
observation.
Okay,
Chair, observation. I'm told consistently that where often female pupils and teachers are extreme bullying by a perpetrator in the school, that they are made to feel like they are the problem for raising an issue. That often the Board of Governors of the EA is saying, really, do you want to make an issue? How do we deal with the suspect?
And I'm going to have
you need to stay. Can you make it clear that victims come
I
first?
am going to have to just draw a line, because I think
absolutely, Chairman.
Comment. That
was what Mr. Burrow. But I think it's important on that particular issue just to say, of course, the victim should always come first. And I do, unfortunately, have some cases where families reach out and they indicate that there's been significant effort made to deal with how the alleged perpetrator in such circumstances are accommodated and their needs are being met, and yet the individual that has brought forward these concerns do not feel that they have got the same level of support. It should be victim first, and how we meet their needs. That should be the starting point in trying to address these issues.
We draw a line there. Just to indicate to members, I am giving members extra time. If you then push on the extra time, we really get up against it very quickly. So,
and only to say, I'm happy to stay with a lot of time, but it will encroach.
No, absolutely. No, I'm very mindful of that. So again, members, you've been given extra time. If you push beyond that, it starts impacting people further down the list who'll be under more pressure. So please do work with me on that. Cathy, you had indicated next.
Thanks, Chair. Minister, every week there seems to be a new problem that's not being dealt with. Now, I know you don't like me listing them out, but I'm asking you to bear with me because there are some very important issues. We know that children still don't have a school place in September. You've said 180 pupils still unplaced with additional needs. We have children who are sitting in inappropriate places that don't meet their needs. Now, that's just not fair. We have parents who day in and day out are fighting for support for their children with additional needs. We have teachers who are telling us that they are absolutely exhausted and overwhelmed. Sankos has already been raised They're at absolute breaking point. School leaders are struggling to keep up with the constant change and the speed of change. You're now attacking the rights of our teachers to strike. Teaching unions are now balloting their members, and this is all in the backdrop of schools sitting with buckets catching rainwater coming in through the roof. You've now less than a year left in your tenure. Have you failed as Education Minister?
I think it's important that we don't present the picture of every school having buckets of water. Plenty do. Well, the overwhelming majority don't. Okay, so the hundreds of schools that I have visited, there are some, and I was in CBS Armagh this morning. I was with the principal for the second time because of his concerns around maintenance and not getting the support that he has wanted for his school. So those are well documented, and there needs to be better support. But there are other schools that I have been in, which are outstanding buildings, and they have been invested in.
There are schools that are state of the art, but there are also schools that do have rainwater coming in through the roof.
There is. I accept that. There are those that do not, that need to have more investment in them. But I'm just asking for a bit more balance in terms of let's not represent that every school is in a dire situation. That's not the case. But we do need to do more to support those schools. That's why we want to have the ability to have planned maintenance programmes so that it's not reactionary, that it isn't down to the emergency type scenarios where a health and safety assessment says it's no longer fit for purpose, or there are issues to do with boilers that break down and we need to move in. So I don't want that kind of reactionary process, but that does require a recognition by all of us that there needs to be significant planned increases in our budget to allow for maintenance programmes to be more coordinated. So I don't disagree that there are challenges, and there are some schools that I've been in and I have been shocked at the disrepair that they have and do continue to deal with. But that is not the entire school estate.
That's the answer to all of that?
No, because, I'm addressing the school estate.
What about school leaders who are really struggling with the speed of the change? What about the Senkos who are at absolute breaking point? Your own officials, Minister, sat in a meeting, and I'm sure they reported back to you. I hope they reported back to you that they sat in a meeting in Downpatrick that was outrageous at the level of fear, frustration, anger of over 60 school leaders and Senkos.
So I have met hundreds of school principals, and the picture that you're representing may be reflective of some, but not all. And the conferences that I held, that I invited every member of this committee to come to, I engaged with well over half of every single school principal. And the feedback that we have got from that has been exceptional.
Man, are you seriously telling me
I am serious that what we are doing...
Principals are happy with what is happening at the minute. The Senkos are happy
because they actually see what I outlined earlier, that we are taking seriously workload-related challenges. We have to work through them.
They're in the middle of
curriculum reform,
industrial action.
And not only is that me saying it, the people who are leading the change around all of these reforms are school principals in your own constituency. They are school principals from West Belfast, from across the province. They are involved in every aspect of the transformation process. And the principals who got up and spoke at those conferences, which members would have heard from had they went...
What about the principals who walked out?
They have said...
What about the principals who walked out in my constituency, which is in West Belfast?
There were no principals who walked out from the transform.
There was.
There were. Whenever it came to 3 o'clock, there were people who walked out because it had went beyond the time of the conference. It is a nonsense to attribute criticism of what we're doing on the basis of a handful of people who had to leave early when it wasn't early because the schedule had went beyond the time. So if you want to speak to people about these changes, I will happily signpost you to principals in your constituency.
What if I signpost you to the principals who have these issues? Because every time I seem to raise them, you wash them away completely.
No,
you
I
do,
don't.
Minister.
I've met them.
So have you not heard these concerns?
I have had concerns raised with me from I came into office, and what I went about, having listened to them, was to embark upon a transformation process to improve it. I asked at the start, do people think our current system is working? The answer is no.
So you're going to ask them now if your changes are working? So
to retain the status quo will not help the school principals or the teachers. That's why we're working through change, and that change isn't being led by me. It's being led by school principals and practitioners within the education system. I could give you a list of well over 50 school leaders who are involved in all of the work. And the school...
I could give you a list of well over that who are in complete despair with what is happening now, and you're not listening to them. And
no, I am. That's why I'm making change.
They're balloting. At this minute in time, they're balloting.
That's why I am making change. If I wasn't listening to teachers and school leaders, I wouldn't do anything in this role. I'd have just retained the status quo.
You're bullying on with what your own agenda, with what it is you want to do.
It's not my agenda.
Despite what they are saying.
It's not my agenda. It's not my agenda. And it would be unfair of me to start listing all the school leaders, because then people will go, oh, really? So they're all involved in this? I could give you the list of school leaders who spoke at those conferences, principals who got up and said, I know there are difficulties, I know there are challenges, but this, for the first time in a long time, is the pathway towards improving our education system.
Okay, look,
that's not me saying it, it's school principals.
Because it's not me that's saying this either, it's school principals and teachers that are saying this to me. I want to go to the placements issue. You mentioned that there was 180 pupils not placed. How many of those pupils that are placed have a physical place waiting for them in September?
How many of who are placed?
Yeah, have an actual physical place waiting for them in September. Because it seems to be that there are children who are placed, but there is no actual physical classroom for them to go to.
Well, so like you'll be familiar with the last couple of years in terms of the process of making sure we can set up the physical places for those children, and that is continuing to be developed. So what we've identified is a need for September 26 around 950 additional places to be established. That work is ongoing to make sure that we can deliver on that.
We're towards the middle of June now, and I know because I'm dealing with some of my own constituency.
Hundreds of them have been placed. Hundreds have been placed.
But they don't have a physical place to go to.
And so
they've been taken off a list, but they don't have somewhere to go to in September.
The work that EA will take forward is to make sure that if a SPIM's being established or a classroom's being repurposed, that work will continue over the summer. There will be young people that will be placed in a school, as they have in the last 2 years, where contingency arrangements need to be put in place in order to provide support for those children, and those children then come to the school as soon as that work is being completed. But there are hundreds of places that have been confirmed, hundreds of places that have been created across those schools. And then what we've also been able to take forward, because we've identified the challenges, on the 16th of March, the EA operating officer wrote to 70 schools of areas of need. We have had EA's teams go out, and as of the 21st of May, 44 of those schools have had site visits. 3 further are being followed up. All of that is engaging to make sure we can provide those placements.
And I understand that, and I also have 2 schools that have engaged with the EA who have space, but they've blank back. They haven't been.
I would love to know, because I had an experience in my own constituency where a school wanted to provide a SPEM and the EA said no, and then I had to get involved. And not only have they got 1, they've got 2, meeting the needs of people within the wider Carryduff area. Yeah. So there are examples where I've been to schools and they've said we want to provide a SPEM, and I've rightly then went to EA and said,
surely there's
what
something wrong
doing?
there. If the EA are crying out for these spaces, the spaces are there and they're not being taken up on.
So what EA will say to me, and listen, you have members on the EA board as well. I hold the EA to account. They will say schools may have capacity, but they may not always be in the place of where the highest need exists. And so it's identifying where is the places of highest need and how do we create the capacity there. There are some schools that have said we have space, but there isn't a demand in that area.
And meanwhile, we do have children who are travelling from Downpatrick to West
Correct.
Belfast. One final question.
Unfortunately, Kathy, time is going to be just a final comment. You wanted to register.
If I could, Suzanne, could I direct a question towards yourself?
No, we don't have time for a further
Secretary?
inquiry, so because time has beaten us on this one, so we'll have to draw a line there. I would be happy if you wanted to make a final comment to close, but no, that's fine. Next member is Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, folks. I guess the first thing I want to do, and I hadn't intended to ask this, but John raised the issue around supporting victims of assault in school. And I'm just going to take the opportunity, when you're so positive there, Minister, about the emphasis should be on the victim and their needs. It's a young girl, I think you perhaps have met them as well, from our constituency. She came to me not to complain, if you like, about what had happened. She wanted to see some change. She feels there is a gap in policy in terms of guidance for schools in those circumstances, that I think they did everything they were required to do, the school, but at the end of the day, the experience she had was really negative. So if you would give a commitment today to perhaps meet with her or meet with me to actually see if there's a way through your department to take that forward, I think that would be a really positive one, and one I would certainly love to see happen.
If I can, I have no objection to meeting people who come to me looking support. So if I can, of course I will. I have no issue in trying to meet with people. All I say though is we're at times we're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of children, and if I as Minister say I will meet every single child around every single issue, that's physically and humanly impossible. But you've asked me to meet this one. I don't know the circumstances because I don't know the name.
You've met them before, so if it's not you personally, Minister, it's more the action that they want to see. It would be, I think I raised when the EA were here as well, and you've raised it yourself. So if there was a way to actually take this forward, it wouldn't be a huge resource capacity, I don't think, to do this, but a young girl's coming wanting to see change, and I think it'd be a really positive one. So if there's a way to make it happen, I'd love to see.
Certainly, if I can, I will.
Thank you, appreciate that. I'm going to ask you a question then more connected to the events of the last 24 hours. You know I have an interest in children missing in education and seeing the work that gets progressed on that. So last year when family homes were attacked and children went missing in our education system, they disappeared from schools and tracer letters had to be sent out to try and establish where they had gone. There's been an increase in children, and you attributed that to the disorder in Ballymena last year. So obviously in light of yesterday, I'm wondering what has changed in that system, what improvements you have made since then, to make sure that we are able to trace vulnerable children in our system.
So where it gets raised with us within EA, children missing in education, it's not to say that these children are missing. Obviously they're there, but the ability for education to identify them is the challenge, and that can be for different reasons. The Ballymena scenario was largely to do with a Roma community who left, and we weren't able to then identify where they had left, and they were therefore missing in education. So
it's getting there quicker though when they go. It was some months later that the tracer letters get sent, and by then I guess that was one scenario, but another scenario that could end up in a really bad situation for a child.
No, it can. Obviously, I want to know what attendance is the starting point for me. How many people didn't come to school today as a result of what happened last night? Then I will be better informed around the impact of anecdotal evidence that has been impacted. I don't have evidence yet. And that's not to say it hasn't happened. Unfortunately, that the people have now left the local communities that they were lived in as a result of some of the violence that took place. Other than to say that as schools identify these issues, we will seek to support them as far as we can, and trying to where are they, how can we trace them, how can we find them in order to make sure there's support for them.
Yeah, and just not to labour it, but there is a system vulnerability. That's one example, but there's another one that's a bigger gap, and I'm always just keen to see that will be closed at some point. Sort of similar to Kathy, I didn't know, there's so many things to ask, and I took my reference from a burning issues list that a teacher in Lisburn had given me at a school visit. I'll not go through it all. Some of the thing on top of the list was change, transform ed, too fast, training days, but on what? I know I got some feedback from the last training day that people were expecting, I guess, more detail on what they were going to have to do, and felt it was still quite theoretical. There was, second point was on SPIMS, and they said the reality, we understand the challenge around SPIMS. I've had feedback from people in our constituency where they have taken that opportunity to put a SPIM in. They've been given commitments by the EA, for example, no children here will be placed with intimate care, and then every child that's placed has intimate care needs, and they don't have the facilities to handle them. So that, I'm not going to get into the specific, I'm just highlighting what this list is referring to. Just how difficult it is for teachers. A teacher a day is exhausting, and again the expectation here is everything you've described in terms of making a case for change isn't disputed, but you need your teachers to deliver it, and their capacity to deliver all of this in one go seems unrealistic. But SEN is the bit that takes up most of this list, so I want to ask a bit about the SEN stuff. So the last time you were here we discussed lit teams. I think you agreed with me that the analysis that we needed to do less and we needed to do better, and I think there has been a recalibration there is now a sharper focus on what we need to do within SEND delivery. Are we doing better? I think the measure of that is the outcomes for children. But again, I would reflect that disconnect between often what we hear here from officials and what we hear on the ground from SENCOs and from teachers. I have children who are placed, for example, who have really significant behavioural problems. They express that they can't take that child and meet their needs, and they're told, well, if you don't take them in your SPIM, we're going to put them in your mainstream. So that idea of horse trading and kind of trying to get the numbers down is something that they're feeling, and these teachers want to meet the needs of the kids, so those kind of experiences are not great. But then when the child comes into the system and they have something like behavioural support requirements, they'll go through the local lit team and they can't get any support. So I've asked you for figures on what the behavioural support is within the Lisburn area. There's no resource. I've got two sets of figures. One says there's one says there's none. We said lit teams could work as a model, but only if it resourced. So what's your understanding, Minister, of how those teams are being resourced right now? And I mean, is it adequate?
A number of points. So let me deal with that first. The last point first of all. They're not being resourced the way that they need to be rolled out to be effective as many areas as possible. I think there was the reorganisation of the lit teams so that it was more reflective of the healthcare trusts across Northern Ireland. That has been helpful. And the impact that it has been having for where it is available, I think members can be assured it is good, it is positive. That's not just those who are involved in EA and lit that are telling me, but in terms of the responses that EA had carried out when it came to their satisfaction levels, there was a survey recently, an evaluation of 1,500 school staff, and 97% reported that lit support had either been very positive or positive. So where it is in place, the feedback is almost universally, it is helpful, it is positive. My concern is that is not available in the way that it should be right across the province. And so the resources that are needed in order to have that all staffed up in a way that reflects what EA do and what health trusts do isn't consistently available. So the model, I think, works, and that's the evidence that we've got from those evaluation forms, but it isn't available across the province in the way that I would want it to be.
I think, is that not the core problem then, that it's now created a postcode lottery for kids in terms of the support that they can get? I mean, like I say, I've always said this is a model that can work if it's resourced, but if it's not going to be resourced, are we getting to a point now where we have to conclude actually this model is not the best way? Because should we not be focusing on the need and moving the limited resource that we have to where the need is the most? Because again, that's where you get certain schools are like, well, I don't have any resource at all here. I can get no support for these children. I'm not sure how that's better. So you've got a model in theory that's good, but if it's not going to be matched by resourcing, do we have to accept that it's not going to work?
No, I think the evidence shows that actually when it is adequately supported,
People support everywhere. So if we look at outcomes for kids,
so
then
this
it's
initiative,
failing some kids.
This initiative was started last September. There are 28 local impact teams that exist across the province. EA realigned that in order to help the health trusts to be part of that. And where it is working, it is very effective. I think what that says is this model is good, it will make an impact, but it needs to be properly staffed and resourced. That's not unique for my department, it requires others to be participating in that. And so I think it is a good model, but you're right, at the moment there is an inequity in terms of the existence of it, but it needs to continue to be developed in order for it to be impactful.
Yeah. We've always talked
For one final question.
Multidisciplinary support for lit teams is something again that we've talked about, and making sure that there's an interaction with health, which, let's be honest, we all know is not working at all, the interactions with health. But I asked a question recently about how you were engaging with health in terms of allied health professionals in local impact teams, and the answer you gave was focused around the enhanced support model, and it wasn't actually talking about lit teams at all. So I'm just wondering, are you still committed to that model in terms of providing health support and multidisciplinary support into lit teams as intended, or is that now the emphasis in terms of AHPs being moved to this new enhanced support model? And that's really a genuine question for clarity.
Yeah,
It's just I was confused by the answer.
Yeah, no, of course. So the answer is no. I'm not wanting to dilute at all the desire for those AHPs to be part of those local impact teams. The enhanced support model for schools is around having specialist general support within a school that can provide a whole school response to young people that have additional needs, and that is part of the reform, which we haven't really yet got into. But 150 schools, including someone in Lisburn, and I would commend Largymore Primary as one if you haven't been. They have actually had a different approach to SEND provision, and that has reduced the number of classroom assistants and allowed employment of other general support with specialisms, which has then been deployed for children who don't have statements of educational need. And the number of children that have statements have actually reduced. It's not that the need has reduced, it's the fact they don't need then to get a statement to get access to support. So that model is one that 150 schools are already engaged in this. EA are working with them as part of the enhanced model to how they can refine that process before they would roll that out to other schools. So that is, they are two distinct, obviously complementary, but it is not that I would want AHPs to be the solution to enhanced support for SEN. They have to be part of the local impact.
To close there, Cara, you'd indicated next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister and panel, for being here today. My line of questioning is really focused around policy, particularly around children in our education system who are often forgotten, really honing in on emotional anxiety-based school avoidance. I feel strongly this brings together core issues like ADHD, autism, delays in waiting lists and getting a diagnosis, special educational needs, and of course wider mental health issues our young people are facing. When it comes to record keeping and emotional anxiety-based school avoidance, previously in targeted questions, it was revealed there were challenges from an IT perspective in getting this data. Has that now been rectified?
I don't know the answer to that. Okay. So I'll let me come back to you on that. If there was a data issue around it, let me come back to you.
Certainly. Essentially, recently I had met with a constituent and his mother. He was suspended from school. Before that, he had profound challenges with emotional-based and anxiety-based school avoidance, and he recently applied for the education otherwise outside of the school setting, and was told that he hadn't met the deadline and he still hasn't got access to education while outside of the classroom setting. Is that a standalone case, or is that something that your department has seen before?
Ask me that one again, sorry.
So I have a child in my constituency who has been suspended from school, has faced a 5-day suspension. He was told to apply for EOTAS also. EOTAS? Yeah. And he was told that the deadline, he has passed the deadline and thus cannot access that service. Is that a standalone case, or is that something you've heard of before?
I don't know.
Okay, no problem, I'll come back.
Unless the team here know the answer to that,
No.
But I don't know the specific. Okay. It's not one that
I think I'm finding gaps.
If it was a suspension, it would be exceptional teaching arrangements rather than EOTAS. EOTAS is a long-term placement education other than at school. It might be exceptional teaching arrangements for the period of the suspension or something like that, but we can certainly get more information.
Okay, no problem, thank you. From a prolonged absence, well actually I'll go back to the suspension point. If a child has been given a 5-day suspension, what mechanisms of support are available to them?
If they're suspended, they're obviously suspended for particular reasons.
Oh no, of course, but I'm thinking, children just don't get suspended for no reason. Evidently there could be
legal requirement for the school to provide work for them during the period of the suspension. So all schools must provide work for children during a period of suspension from school. That's a legal requirement.
So that's mandatory.
Yeah.
And is that monitored to ensure that every child gets followed up with by your department?
So there's a facility, obviously the first protocol would be complaint within the school, so it would be for the child or their representative as the parent to raise a complaint to the Board of Governors in the first instance rather than to the department.
Okay, no problem. Just bouncing back then to anxiety-based school avoidance, can I ask, I know you had said there's lack of clarity around the IT issue, but do you have codes for different reasoning behind absence in your department? Okay. So you are monitoring whether it's bullying, anxiety, ADHD. What trends have you seen?
Well, let me give you the specific data in terms of the various codes that there are to record attendance. Suzanne, are you aware of the different codes? There are some codes around attendance that we record, but I'm happy to give the specific.
Yeah, that would be.
It would be great. This is an example.
It would be fantastic if you had them.
It would be
today,
great, Chairman. This is an example of if there were this level of kind of specific questioning in advance. I would obviously be able to give that if it's something that members can in future just provide me
I'll
with.
follow up with an opinion question. Okay.
That's fair. Yeah.
From a statistical, looking at statistics, we know that over 500 parents have been held accountable, prosecuted for non-school attendance. Minister, speaking with those parents, those families and those pupils, these are good kids. They are struggling with anxiety, they're struggling with bullying, perhaps, waiting or saving up for an ADHD assessment due to the profound waiting lists that we're seeing in Northern Ireland. These are good kids, and their parents have had to be essentially prosecuted for non-attendance. They feel left behind, they feel not listened to, and they believe it is because our schools are under significant pressure, and their child just really struggles with that classroom setting. Do you think it's appropriate that those parents are being prosecuted, or do you think, given the challenges our schools and our young people are experiencing, is there another way?
I think the figures for prosecution are in the low double figures. This is a matter of last resort before you would go down the route of prosecution in that respect. So I don't think that would ever be entered into lightly by the EA whenever they would take this course of action. Mm-hmm. What I can say from my understanding, unfortunately there are examples where parents are not sending their children to school despite all of the efforts that go in, and there's a significant amount of resource and effort that goes in by welfare officers in order to engage with families, to provide support. And if the judgment is made by those educational professionals that it is not reasonable in the course of action that parents are not having their children go to school, mm-hmm. I think it's right that a decision can be taken to ensure that the child does not miss out on having an education. So if you've exhausted every single possible opportunity to provide support to the child, are we saying that we should then, the parents are refusing and therefore there is no way to actually try and enable for those children to come forward? Mm-hmm. I think we'll have to get the balance here as to getting the right level of support, but also making sure that as a matter of last resort, that if this is a method that is necessary to help make sure a child comes to school, then that is something that is not taken lightly within EA, and I wouldn't want to remove that from them as an option.
Okay. Just moving on then, Suzanne, previously I had mentioned point 8 of the 10-point plan for Transform Ed focuses on educational disadvantage. And just a point of clarity, it's maternal education level and free school meals. Is that essentially how the department is defining educational disadvantage?
In terms of our measures of educational disadvantage, they vary between different programmes. So, for example, the targeting social need funding through the common funding formula is based on free school meals. For other programmes, we look at levels of educational attainment. I'm aware that there's a strong link between the level of maternal education and educational outcomes for children. It's one of the strongest correlations. It's not a correlation that we use for any funded programmes.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to ask then, and I'd raised it before, what I'm picking up in my constituency, speaking with parents and speaking with young people, oftentimes what's acting as a barrier to education is trauma in the home, so domestic violence, abuse that they've endured, children of addicts, of alcoholics. There's over 40,000 of them in Northern Ireland. Oftentimes that cohort of young people are unseen, they don't speak about it, they don't talk about it. How are we targeting those children, and how will Transform Ed help transform their lives in education?
Well, obviously, if it is completely unknown, it's very difficult to be able to identify if it isn't being flagged up through the normal processes where statutory agencies.
How are you going to change that, Minister?
Well, so a lot of this is detected. That's why schools engage through the various statutory agencies that exist, and they provide information, whether that can be through health visitors, whether it's the police, whether it's other organisations, where we are aware as a society that domestic abuse has taken place. Of course, there are significant measures that go in to provide support. If you're asking me the question, in the absence of anybody from any agency or any neighbour or anyone in society actually coming forward and saying, we believe that this child may be in a home where there is significant issues, well, that's very difficult for someone to actually know that's the case. But school...
Transform Ed, though, like with those children, if they are known, for example, how will Transform Ed help support them in their educational journey?
In terms of if they're suffering domestic abuse in the house?
Looking at being trauma informed in our education settings and our school settings and supporting those children and seeing the challenges they face at home is shaping their ability to prosper in our education system.
Well, I'm just trying to understand the line of questioning. If the question is a child that nobody knows is suffering from domestic abuse in their house, that's very difficult for any organisation. But what I would say is, if they are known. Oh, absolutely.
I'm just talking about in general. If a child is
but
suffering,
there will be distinct and separate supports for a child. If a child is in a home where there's domestic abuse taking place, there is very specific support that will be provided. Schools will be engaged. Those school principals and leaders will be part of an ongoing team that will actively manage what is happening. So it's not that Transform Ed is now going to do something that already isn't there. So and school teachers, they are very adept at identifying if there are issues in the home with a child and trying to see what is happening. And as soon as they are aware of it, then the schools proactively engage with all of the different agencies as to how they can manage that.
Probably do need to just draw a
line on
at
no,
this
more than
stage.
happy. Just last point then, Minister.
We don't have time to open up a new inquiry at this stage.
Well, I guess
final
then
comment
I'll
if
shut down because I was
add.
going to ask just about, we've seen the increased violence on our streets, and I just want to reiterate the importance of our youth services that I think really step up and provide support and safeguarding. And when we're looking at the long-term strategies around peace building and supporting our young people to really ensure that yes, budgets are tight, but we need our youth funding to be secure.
Yeah, Minister, I might actually invite you to speak briefly to that. Given what we saw on the streets yesterday, I think the role of diversionary youth services is really important and in the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And Cara did raise that at the start of the meeting. Yeah. Will you be standing up additional support for youth services in the current context and looking at the longer term funding picture? And I would just a brief response.
Yes, well, and this morning I engaged with the Education Authority, and this was one of the issues that we talked about, and the youth diversionary team within EA and the youth services are actively engaged where there are difficulties. I referred to that in my opening comments. Well, what I would refer to members today, at 12 o'clock we put out for consultation the youth strategy, which has been worked through EA and all of the community and voluntary sector uniformed youth organisations, and that is now available as to what support are we going to provide to youth organisations, and that is contained within now a public consultation document. So I know the committee won't have had an opportunity to look through that, but I very much will welcome the feedback that have we moved in the right direction of travel in terms of how we support youth organisations and the framework that EA will operate in. That is now available, and I know for some members, I know Danny's not here today, but I know it's one that he is regularly asked around youth work and youth support, and there's a document out now that will shape the funding framework, support all of that. It'll be important to get feedback from members, and I would welcome that.
No doubt the committee will engage. It's been an issue we've retained attention to, and but thank you for the reminder on that, as we did raise that at the top of the meeting, Cara, around youth services. Julie, you'd indicated.
Thank you, Chair. And Chair, just through you at the beginning of my little bit of speaking, I just wanted to let the committee know that I've had very, very positive engagement with the School Council of Sion Mills Integrated Primary School, and I'm actually visiting them tomorrow, and I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be quite a positive meeting, and I do know they have a few issues that they want to talk to, but we should all be listening to children when they want to raise something, so really looking forward to that. Minister, I thank you and all of your team for being here today. Thank you for your answers and the information that you have shared. And I do want to remark before I question that when you see a need for change, it is often really difficult to be proactive on that. But I've been watching for a long time, and you have been proactive, and you have had the grace to listen to people even in difficult circumstances. So thank you for that. I believe that it is imperative that we roll out Transform Ed at the proper pace, and I believe that that is what is happening, and I'm glad that you have worked with those that create the foundation for our education system, which is our educators and our school leaders. I think that is right, and I think that is proper. Can I please ask that you outline what it looks like, what the next stage of Transform Ed looks like, how you see this potentially being received, and also, importantly, the benefits you foresee. And I would also just like to add that any school leader that I have spoken to have given me very positive feedback regarding Transform Ed. So I'm just keen to know, moving forward, if there's any updates you can share today. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, and welcome to the committee, and thank you for what you're doing on that. And I'm sure you will brief me on the Cyan Mills visit in due course. So.
You go yourself, Paul, and I'll look at it.
Well, I have visited well over 200 schools. Well over 200 schools.
Deputy Chair, if I could just make sure we'll let Julie.
I know. Well, he's saying it in jest. I know there's no particular animosity on that suggestion. I didn't get it. I can't. I'm sure there would have been a very good reason. I do not casually just decide not to go to a school event. There's very, very few that I've ever cancelled on because I know the work that goes in and the disappointment that comes if I can't go. So I don't have my diary at hand just to be able to say this was the reason why. But there's very few that I ever would decline on because I know they put a lot of work into these visits. So
all the more reason to go.
In terms of the broader points around Transform Ed, and I welcome the feedback that you're getting, the next 12 months are going to be really important, and the pace is going to be phased, and all of the work that has been taken forward is at a high level, but it has utilised our local practitioners with international experts, and we have prepared with TPL, Teacher Professional Learning Funding. We have provided training days. So often what teachers will say is a new policy comes in and there's been no preparation, no training provided, and we're just expected to be able to do this. I've provided specific days for schools to allow them to have training related to Transform Ed. And I have engaged with the professionals in order to do that. So the next 12 months is moving from high-level policy development informed by local practitioners towards a delivery phase associated with that. So within a very short period of time, we have had exceptional people involved in the development of the curriculum for every subject from the earliest years right until upper sixth. And that has been led by a list of principals, school leaders from every sector, and they are phenomenally talented people, and I'm indebted to them. And I've no doubt the committee will want to hear from those who have been involved. But that will go out to public consultation. And it'll be a lengthy consultation because it is important that we get the feedback around this curriculum, because that will be what is the basis of what is taught for hopefully not as long as the last one, which was over 20 years. You should be reviewing your curriculum and evolving it every 5-6 years. That would be common practice. Our curriculum hasn't changed in 20 years and it's not a very good curriculum. So this is timely. That will go out to consultation, and I would ask members to engage in that and to look at that, but also to listen to the teaching professionals who have developed. I've just enabled this work. I haven't been involved in writing any of this curriculum. I've allowed the teaching profession to do it. So this is their work, and I really do appeal to members. Please give it the opportunity to get a proper hearing. Before people just want to rush out and give a view because it's Transform Ed, and therefore I have to be against it because it's Transform Ed. That would be a reckless thing for people to do. So that'll go out for consultation, and that is a key step in the process that we're going to take forward. A number of other, very quickly, what I'll just mention, religious education syllabus, that's going to be going out. It's very close. It's not quite there yet, but that will be coming out soon as well. The publication of pedagogical principles, and see, when pedagogy was used when I was first a minister, I said, what is that? I'm sure members now know what that is, but it is how you teach. That, and I couldn't even pronounce it. and one of the speakers said, I don't even try, I just say, this is how you teach. but the pedagogy, guidance around the curriculum. We need to develop high quality resources, because what is it? A criticism has been a curriculum is published, but then we don't provide the resources. So there's the development of resources that will align with the curriculum. There is teacher training around professional learning that will be developed. There's a digital platform which is also going to help support that delivery. There's the reform of assessment, and we've already started that and introduced some of that into our schools. But that will help strengthen the system level checks. And that is really important, even in P1, just a very quick snapshot of where a child is at. We don't have that. School level has it, but we don't have it at a system-wide level, and there's inconsistency. So this will be something that's really important. The progression on the new GCSE's A-level specifications, importantly leadership training for middle leaders, because we have a tier of principals who, you know, like everything, succession planning. Every organisation needs the next tier to come through. But you're a vice principal, and sometimes that can be scary, becoming the principal, being the final person who's accountable. And so what we've recognised, there is a need to support that middle tier management that connects from the teacher to the principal. There's a middle tier that needs to have support. So there's a new leadership programme that's been developed for that. Professional learning and subject networks and the RAISE. So there is a lot of work being developed that I think will have really positive impacts for education in the next 12 months.
Yeah, thank you, Minister. And I'm just going to make a very brief comment and then a second very brief question. But I just want to welcome all of that information. I think that is wonderful. And I think that as not only an MLA, but also a mother of young children, I am genuinely excited for the changes that are happening and the education system that they will avail of. So I definitely thank the team for that. But I do want to remark, and this is my own personal observation as a new MLA, I have heard multiple times from various parties since I started in Stormont that this was your agenda and your work and your idea. And I really believe, and I have believed this for some time, that completely undermines the work of the educational leaders and the educational experts who are driving this forward. And that is just my own observation, and that is a remark that I want to put on record. My second question, Minister, is around the childcare subsidy, and I really do commend you for your commitment to working families. I have seen the benefits of this in my own constituency, and I know that it has been a great help to many. Could you please outline what feedback your department has received from local registered childcare providers, just regarding how easy they have found the adaptation process, and even given the financial challenges at the moment, what further steps could be taken perhaps to provide further assistance?
So how the scheme works is very straightforward. Initially when it was introduced, of course it was new and there had to be a lot of support, but it is a very straightforward scheme to operate, and that's why the uptake has been so successful and has drawn down tens of millions of pounds, you know, in terms of support, and increased the drawdown from the UK because it's tied into their tax-free allowance as well. So it has been very beneficial, undoubtedly, to parents. With that, you have the pressure of increasing costs that every sector is facing. But that's why we have increased the cap. You know, so the value of the 15% has continued to increase over the past 2 years to help mitigate against the rising costs associated with those pressures that other providers are having. The concern that I do have, and it's one that I have raised with the executive, the funding for the childcare subsidy scheme, I should phrase it right, the childcare subsidy scheme sits within the early learning childcare executive funded strategy. And within that we fund Sure Start, we've expanded Sure Start, we have helped support additional support in preschool settings for children that have special needs. We have provided support to many early year providers, and we have turned part-time nursery places into full-time nursery, and we've been able to bring on thousands of places that are now full-time in nursery. That is all part of the early learning. The subsidy is one element of it, an important one though that it is.
Close on this as quickly as possible.
But that 55 million, some of that funding came in stream, and what was announced in the draft budget would be a real terms cut if it is not addressed, and it would have implications for what has been developed by the executive. It's not money that sits in my department, it sits as ring fence funding. So I can advise the committee, I have put in an executive paper, I have requested the funding that is needed which is 75 million, not 55 million. If that is not provided, then there will be real world consequences to those organisations. It is not to create unnecessary alarm, but there is a paper before the executive. I have also put that in now by urgent procedure because it is becoming time critical. And I again would appeal to members of this committee, help me ensure that the funding, which is vitally needed, is actually put forward to allow that work on the early years and the childcare to be supported. But I need the support of other parties in this executive. My party is committed to it. I need others to support me.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. We have one more member to come in. Very conscious you've been talking now for 2 hours, so you've been very, very generous with your time and are probably ready for a lie down in a darkened room. So I will bring David in and then we can let you go.
David will bring the light.
and David will never use his full time. He never does. So
or maybe not. I don't take it for granted with my own colleagues.
Well, just the start, Minister, I would say that I did get along to a couple of the Transform Ed events. I heard very little other than positivity around those events. I have, at every school in my own constituency that I've went into, very deliberately asked what their thoughts are on Transform Ed and tried to get a genuine sense of that. And almost exclusively they have been positive about Transform Ed and the principles thereof. There have been some that have said, look, as things have progressed, we felt that the pace might have been going a little too fast, and but no stronger than that, and certainly positive about it. So it's something that's certainly the picture that I'm seeing from schools in my area and from principals that I've spoke to from outside my area as well. It's not what I'm going to ask a question on, though. It's probably to go back and John and his, as he was finishing off, probably wanted to go into this a bit deeper, but it's something I was looking to ask about anyway. We have heard routinely on this committee around, particularly, assaults on teachers. Some of those have been SEN-related, and those are that's a different matter. But an increase in teacher injuries and so on, and also we've had that talk of misogyny and toxicity around that. I just wondered whether, with a sort of picture of maybe worsening behaviour with some pupils in some schools, whether there is any plans to have a look at behaviour policy.
So if you look at the data on the number of detentions, suspensions, it is significant. It is not a small figure. It is a very high figure. That tells me there's a challenge for our schools when it comes to maintaining discipline. Now, I'll not repeat the age of criminal responsibility because that's at extremity, but it is nevertheless important. But there is a wider challenge when it comes to maintaining good behaviour in a school, and that's vital in terms of the delivery of education. And there is different approaches being applied elsewhere. So what I can, and I think I have already provided this information, I do want to take a look at what is the guidance around best practice when it comes to behaviour. So I don't have because I'm not an expert on what actually would constitute this, but I think it is timely that we would look at behaviour practice within our schools. So there will be a piece of work that we're going to carry out in order to look at what are the various approaches that different schools are applying. Are there lessons to be learned, and what's the most effective way to do this? And that does vary, but I think we as a department, there is a responsibility on us to provide guidance through the Education Authority as to what would be regarded as best practice. So I think it's timely that we would look at the kind of behavioural issues that exist within our schools, and that is borne out with the feedback that we can look at with the data. It's also been borne out with my discussions with the trade unions. And when one of the trade unions that I met with had indicated to me there is a very real concern around behavioural challenges that you've articulated, and a need to look at the policy around that. So I'm wanting to respond to that. Let's look at this. I have no predetermined view. In the same way, when I became minister, I didn't come in with any agenda around what we're now doing. I allowed the evidence to inform what we should do based on what the practitioners tell me, and this is the same approach when it comes to behaviour policy. I want to hear what people think is the best way to do things, and then help support schools.
I think that is timely, and it'll be reassuring to teachers to hear that that's been considered and being brought forward. Moving on then, one of the issues, and it's been despite cross-party support for the idea that mobile phones within schools are problematic, there have been some ridicule sometimes of the measures that you've proactively brought forward to try and address that. We've had the pilot of the pouch schemes. Perhaps you want to give some reflection on that and whether there's going to be any policy change around mobile phones in order to address that issue.
So we're awaiting, like King's College London, were asked to carry out an independent evaluation, so I haven't got that yet, and that will be the more kind of definitive view on it. I think we all recognise that social media, I think is a curse. It is even for members in this committee when meetings are taking place because they're on it. So I think it is a distraction, and it's a distraction in our schools. And whenever you need to be in front of a teacher engaging, when there's distraction, then that is clearly going to impact the learning that you're receiving. So not just educationally, but its impact socially. The schools that have participated, I think probably the evaluation based on some of the feedback that I've had from my own team, I think there'll be a bit of a variance because it will depend on how well this has been implemented. I know some schools decided to apply the same policy to teachers and others didn't. And I think that's interesting based on some of the feedback that I've had from pupils, because they kind of felt, well, if it's not applied to the whole school, why do I really need to do this? And there's obviously decisions need to be taken, but I know some schools actually did apply this to the entire school population to ensure high levels of consistency and implementation. So I would reference St Ronan's in Lurgan, for example, 1,800 pupils, one of the largest in the province. I wanted them to be included because of that very fact. And the principal there, Fiona, not only does she speak highly of it, she has said to me, and I have been in the school now on a number of occasions, the introduction of those mobile pouches is the single most transformative change that has happened in her school, that has increased educational outcomes and behavioural practice and social interaction. Now, Tester, don't believe me when I say that. If you don't want to, ask the principal, and that is the genuine feedback. And not only that, this was provided to all of our school pupils. We're now having a new cohort come into year 8. Please tell me that this will continue to be supported in our school because of the transformation that it's had. And the pupils have also spoken highly of it because they have engaged in much greater levels of interaction. I think schools, they ought to be a complete safe haven. They should be in a physical sense, they are, but not whenever the outside world can get to them through their phone. And I think we all recognise that mobile phones is a real problem and a challenge. It is for schools, and whatever measures that we can take, we should be doing that to support those schools. So I'm going to await the evaluation for that to come to me, but the evidence that I've had certainly from that school has been that this has been transformative for them as a school. It may be something, Chairman, the committee would like to actually, in due course, ask some of those principals to come in to get their feedback rather than just from me.
No, that would be useful. Another issue that similarly people agree, I think, is going to be significant in the future of our education system, you've touched on already today, is AI. And some agree that that's going to be transformational, whilst at the same time the cost of licences for the department has become the issue that people are pointing to as a catch-all for, well, why can't we do this if we can spend that amount of money on AI licences? When I talked to a school leader just this morning, he was clear that this is something that is going to be transformational for workload if used right, and he listed the amount of things that would be able to be applied to and help in that way. He said that when you work in a profession like teaching, AI is not going to take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI better than you may well do. Mm-hmm. With that in mind, could you speak to maybe how you think AI is going to be better used within our education system, particularly, and he says it's going to be a key part of their pedagogy going forward, and what that means for our children and for our teachers?
Well, I think with the right guardrails, and it's important that there is the proper protections in place, that AI can be a powerful tool to help enable teachers. It can never replace, far from it. but actually it can help assist them in terms of school administration, but also in terms of the delivery of lessons, assessment methods associated with it. AI, I think, can be, with the right guardrails, be something that will be effective. So take for example, if a teacher wanted to create a lesson plan on part of our curriculum, it would be vital that any AI technology is only being able to draw that information from our curriculum. Because if it brought up a lesson plan around the curriculum, that related to some other part of the world or through open source data, that would be terrible. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so therefore it's important that it is effectively harnessed. But here's the challenge. If we don't actually harness it and work with the right people to develop this, the number of incidents of seeking information through AI within our schools to help with lesson plans, I think if you had the statistics, would be frightening, because it is already happening. It is actively being used as part of teaching by going on to open source data. And therefore, if you don't do this in a very controlled, managed way, people inevitably are going to go, if this will help me enhance my job, why would I not use this technology? It is already happening. But we need to make sure it happens in a very regulated way that draws upon the right source material. And that's why we have developed partnerships, and we're taking that forward in order to make sure it is harnessed effectively.
Thank you. Just one more quick
final comment, and then we just draw it to a close.
I just wondered if I could invite, and I'm sure the Minister will be very quick in his comments, if I could invite the Minister to perhaps comment on the recent victory in court over the challenge that was brought around the decision around the Bangor integrated schools, and whether he feels that the integrated sector will now reflect on whether that is appropriate use of resources and time to fight a battle around schools that had such a small percentage of their...
David, members' interpretation has been quite loose around a final comment.
Well, the Minister will understand the question. I'm sure he will be succinct.
I mean, it would be inappropriate to not let you respond, but I would ask that it would be brief, because I think you've already referenced your own schedule and we have other further business to do.
I appreciate that. I suspect if the judgment had went the other way, it wouldn't have taken until David for it to be asked. So I think that's notable. The Court of Appeal decision backed up the High Court decision, which dismissed the challenge, and which very comprehensively dismissed the challenge. The Court of Appeal unanimously agreed with that. And I know at the time many people in this room and elsewhere made serious accusations around that decision process. And I've been found again to have acted entirely legally, and I think others can reflect on the comments that they made in respect of that. So the Court of Appeal decision has came through. It is the right decision, and obviously that will help ensure that whenever we're taking these decisions, we know the basis upon which we're doing it, and it is on the basis upon which legislation was passed in this Assembly, supported by some people in this room who have now been critical of those very same decisions. I can't act out with the law when it comes to these decisions, and I'll continue to take the decisions guided by the legislation.
We'll draw a line there. David, that was a very interesting final comment. We look forward. We have integrated education reps scheduled to attend committee after the summer from both IEF and NICE, so hopefully we can pick all of those issues up around the current state of play around integrated education in Northern Ireland at that stage. That brings the evidence session to a close. It ran slightly over time, but not by much, so I do want to thank the Minister for his generous time, and officials today. That is a long time to be answering questions, so we do appreciate it. Not always a meeting of minds on all issues, but your time is appreciated, and I thank members for all their contributions. Thank you, and
thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members.
Have a discussion briefly on whether there are any particular issues for follow-up that need to be addressed, and then a short comfort break. And I have just rejigged the agenda slightly to bring the Bills office in before we cover correspondence, so that the Assembly staff can get away in good time. So
could I just make one point for clarity? The Minister accused me of calling officials a bunch of liars. That's not a term I ever used about officials. There's only one person in the room who's been caught out lying, and that's the Minister himself. He was asked if he had ever been accused of bullying, and he emphatically said no. And
comments
I'm
are
just putting that on the record.
David, so I think it's noted, Deputy Chair. I would emphasise the Minister's not now here to respond to that, and it's possibly. I don't think there's any need for.
I think it's important to put on record. Certainly, the department felt that their officials had been maligned in that way. And I spoke to a very senior member of the department who was very aggrieved at the way in which their officials had been treated at this committee. So I think the member, whether he wants to get into semantics around what words exactly were used, I think you might want to reflect on the comments that he made at the time.
Well, bunch of liars was never used.
Okay, so I think that's on the record from the Deputy Chair. David's concerns are noted. I would just emphasise again, it is not for me to censor members. Members have to make decisions around their comments and if they stand over them, but I would hope that we could foster an atmosphere in this committee where witnesses feel that they are treated with respect, and I think as long as we all approach things from that basis, we shouldn't have any issues. Deputy Chair,
just one other point in regard to the answers or non-answers from the Minister. It's clear from the answers that he gave or didn't give that he asked a permanent secretary to promote another official within the department. Because if he didn't, all he had to say was, no, I didn't do that. And I would like some information in regard to the procedures or processes that should be used to promote officials within the department, if we could get that from an appropriate source within the civil service.
Deputy Chair, just to give I think we can have a discussion around any actions arising. I think we'd need to be just careful around drawing clear inferences from how the Minister answered the question simply by virtue of the fact that that these are internal HR processes of the department, and I would want to just sound a note of caution on that basis. If I just ask the Clerk in terms of where we're covered in terms of exploring these issues, some advice would be helpful.
It's very compelling, but I'm not here to discuss the committee's procedural or legal advice with him, as you'll all understand. But I think the committee did have some correspondence about a former permanent secretary some time ago, and asked Jane Brady some questions about that, and there wasn't a reply. Now it is open to the committee to ask Jane Brady to publish the review which was referenced in the Minister's written statement of 27th of March, which may or may not be in relation to the same individual. In general, the seniority of officials, in terms of asking questions about civil servants, the seniority of the official will be commensurate with the public interest. So, members have wide freedom of expression and can ask questions. But there are GDPR and other responsibilities, particularly in relation to personal information and personnel issues. So if you were to ask for that report, you might anticipate that it wouldn't be forthcoming. And so there was those are kind of themes running in the background of that discussion. I think the committee maybe did ask before about arrangements for promotion, and I can dig that out if we have it, and otherwise we can write about it. I just wanted to.
David's looking to come in. Would it be inappropriate then, on the basis, and thank you for that advice, would it be appropriate then to, if these queries have been submitted before and a reply remains outstanding, to revisit that correspondence in terms of those issues, if members are agreed, as we had correspondence?
And I suppose, Chair, although the two issues are connected, the information that I'm looking for is procedural or process, as to whether or not a minister can tell a permanent secretary to promote another official within the department. Is that an appropriate process?
I'm content with that as a reasonable question. Other members can come in. David, you'd want to respond?
I think where the Minister was clear in that he said that he believed that Jane Brady, as head of civil service, should release the report. Now, Pat at the time said, you're saying that because you are secure in the knowledge almost that Jane Brady will not do that. If Pat believes that's the case, I suspect that Jane Brady, the only reason she would be withholding a report like that is if she believes that some of the issues that have been discussed in terms of HR and GDPR and some of those legal considerations are sufficient reason that she should not do that. in which case it's equally true then that those issues could not be openly discussed at committee or answered by the Minister. So the Minister is in an impossible position in that if there's a document that he is quite happy to be put in the public sphere, but it is not his responsibility to put that in the public sphere, it is a decision for someone else, that it'd be completely improper for him to speak to that at committee. So it's a decision for Hawks around whether they bring that paper forward and make it publicly available. But to have a situation where for most of a member's contribution they continue to question the Minister and ask for details that he's made clear that it is not for him to speak to, I think was inappropriate.
Thank you, David. Well, I think on that basis,
could I make one final
point? Be very brief and to try and draw a line under this as we have other matters to get through.
This is a matter of public interest, and it goes to the heart of governance within the department, and that's why I have raised it. There's a permanent secretary, a very senior official, who just disappeared off the scene. We don't know whether he's still employed by the department or not. We don't know whether he's still getting his salary or not. We don't know whether he left the department because of a conflict with the Minister. We don't know whether... Well, I know that the Minister went to him and told him to promote another official, but I can't prove that. So all of those are issues of public interest, and that's why I raised it today, and that's why I think we should do our best to try and get more information about it.
On that basis, in terms of a route through this that hopefully we can get committee consensus on, the Minister was clear he would be content for the report to be published, so I think it would be appropriate we could revisit that with the Head of the Civil Service and to reflect the evidence we received from the Minister today and ask that question and to raise those clarifications from the Head of the Civil Service around the procedural issues around promotions within departments and ministerial involvement in that. Are we agreed?
Yeah,
Great.
It is possible that you might get some information about this in the briefing, but it would be a closed session briefing, I imagine.
Yes, and we could
so that's
open up the possibility to that in our correspondence. Okay. Any other items to follow up from that briefing, Karen?
I just note, obviously I wasn't happy with the level of detail it got back when it comes to children who've been experiencing emotional or anxiety-based school avoidance or suspension, and sometimes they come hand in hand. A child is disruptive in the classroom after returning to the setting, and particularly with the EOTIS programme with my constituent, Article 28 of the UN Rights of the Child really details they have a right to education. So would it be possible if we could write a letter as a committee to just grasp more around this programme if anybody has had any challenges accessing it? Because I really feel there's a cohort of children here who are just left behind, overlooked, and families aren't getting the right support or access to education their child deserves.
Is there follow-up correspondence you would like to seek some of that detail from then?
Yeah. I don't know if you want me to do that independently and bring it back to committee, but I just think for those children really experiencing trouble at school, there's not a lot of clarity about who they go to.
Could I suggest, in terms of the level of detail you're seeking, if that was one you took forward separately, but then can share with committee for any follow-up at that stage? Yeah. Okay.
I did have another few things that I thought we might write about. So that was one of them. Then the department said they would come back about codes and monitoring of reasons for non-attendance, as well as the question that you had asked. The Diversionary Youth Services Strategy issued today at 12, or the new Youth Services Strategy, issued today at 12. So the committee might want to schedule that for September. Similarly, there's work being done on behavioural policies. We could ask about the dates of that. And then the Minister suggested that principals involved in the phone pouch pilot might be of interest for a briefing. And he actually asked for support as well for a bid for early years and sure start.
Okay, so in terms of...
Do you have anything else, John?
The NISTER system. Some schools not operating the NISTER system, John.
This is happening all over the place.
I don't know if you want all of those to be written about.
I'm content for correspondence to go on all of that. And in the mobile phone pouches, I'd be keen to understand the cost of rolling that out across the system, because I agree with much of what the Minister says. I do think phones are an absolute scourge and social media is an absolute scourge, and if I could exit it today I would happily do so, but it's just the mechanism by which we ensure that it's not sort of a prevalent influence on our schools I would just be concerned about the capital cost of rolling this out in times of financial constraint, if members are agreed to include that question. Yep. Agreed. And Michelle, you'd want to come in?
I agree with you on the phone pouches and getting the cost of rollout. If we're going to have principals in to speak to it, I think we should have young people in as well, just to balance that off, because I had some today who weren't very complimentary, so we have to have balance on that. I think there's different perspectives there.
No, there absolutely are. Would it be appropriate to for the committee, I think, as the Minister had suggested, to really wait for that evaluation, and then we can make a call as to who we would seek evidence from at that stage, because what's contained in that evaluation will maybe guide our thinking. Okay, I think we have agreement there. I am really conscious of the bill office.
Separate issue, just a correction, Chair. Pat was concerned that he was being his words were being misconstrued. So just to put it on record, Pat said that officials come in, they mislead committees, they tell lies to committees, and they gaslight us. That sounds to me, to paraphrase fairly, that he's calling officials liars, and I can see why the FD union is concerned. Well, gaslight, they mislead and they lie to committees. I think that's a fair summation, and I think the FDA union would agree and would like an apology. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for the intervention, David. And we will draw a line.
Didn't realise you were a member of the FDA union, David.
No, I'm not. But I have read the concerns.
You defend them, you defend the Minister, you defend officials. You're some job. Tell you. Like Robin Hood.
Deputy Chair and David, I'll just ask for this item to be brought to a close, as we do have Bill's office officials here. So at the risk of incurring committee's rage, I am going to propose we just crack on given the time, but if members need to nip out for a comfort break during the evidence session, we can do so. I'll happy to bring the Bill's office officials forward and seek members' agreement as we discuss some items related to both our private members' bills and amendments that we move into a closed session, if members are agreed. Okay.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
Agenda. That's us back into open session, members. So just for anyone rejoining the live feed, we had a discussion with the Bills Office around both private members' bills before the committee at the moment. We agreed to take forward one amendment in the Irish Media and Workforce Plan Bill, and it was agreed that the bill sponsor would engage directly with the Bills Office around amendments that had been flagged as required by the department in their last evidence session. Okay, that moves us on to the remainder of our agenda. So we move on to item 7, which is correspondence. So I'd refer members to pages 84 to 255 of your packs, where a number of items are provided under correspondence, and the summary note at page 82. I'll highlight those items requiring committee decision or discussion. Otherwise, it would be noting as per or actioning as per the summary note. Item 7.4, page 164, is correspondence from the Education Authority regarding the clarification of MLD and SLD specialisms in a special school. Happy to open up to members for comment. I would just note I still don't think this is particularly clear. I would like to just perhaps, and maybe just to get clarity on this, because it references one particular school, but I hear this every special school I visit, that they don't really know what it is they're being asked to do by the department sometimes. Would it be appropriate to write to the EA and ask for a breakdown of each special school on how their specialism, if they have one, is determined? Because when it comes to placements, this is really confusing for principals, it's confusing for parents, if we're agreed on that. Agreed. Item 7.5, correspondence from NICE in relation to a school that had been flagged in a previous meeting in relation to release of a report. I would suggest that we forward that to the college in the first instance if we're agreed. Agreed. Item 7.9, page 190, it's correspondence from the Principal of Bangor Academy regarding the future of vocational education in Northern Ireland. I would want to suggest, I think it's a really helpful piece of correspondence, actually, just reminding us of some of those challenges following on from the Minister's evidence session around some of the curriculum work that's underway, that vocational and skills-based learning is still an area where concerns are being expressed. I would propose we acknowledge receipt and advise the correspondent that these issues, we would intend to raise them with the officials at our concurrent meeting with the Economy Committee next week, and potentially also share that correspondence with the Economy Committee if we're agreed. Agreed. Item 7.13, page 199, it's correspondence from the Northern Ireland Childminding Association requesting a meeting to brief the committee, particularly around the changes to ratios in childcare settings. I think we really should be hearing from NICMA on this, and I certainly had a meeting with them, which was really, I felt very enlightening and constructive, and would suggest we may want to schedule that after recess if we're agreed. Agreed. And then following on from that, item 7.15, page 206, it's a reply from the Health Minister regarding regulatory changes to the childminder sector and details of those ratio changes. I think at this stage, without going into the detail of the correspondence, I would propose that we note, unless any members want to raise anything in particular. I know, Michelle, you had highlighted concerns in this space before.
So are we able to share that with NICMA?
Yeah, absolutely. I suggest it would be appropriate to share with NICMA. And look, if members have any other representatives from any other sort of sectors within the childcare end of things who may want to input to this, please do reach out to them. I think it would be good to hear a broad range of views on this issue of ratios, which has been a vexed issue for many years. Item 7.16, page 210, it's correspondence from a parent regarding safeguarding concerns with Childline, and they were just expressing some concerns around specific advice their child received on the Childline website chat forum. Can I propose in the first instance that we forward this correspondence to the Department of Health, who are responsible for setting policy and statutory guidance for child protection in Northern Ireland, to seek a reply to the individual on their specific concerns, but ask that we be copied in the reply if members are agreed.
Great.
Item 7.17, page 214. It's an invite from the University of Ulster to the Migration Policy Clinic event on the 25th of June. I would propose members note that for their own diaries and RSVP directly if attending. Are we agreed? Item 7.22, page 248. It's correspondence from the Education Authority regarding the SEND framework, and the EA has provided a copy of its correspondence to the Children's Law Centre pursuing its engagement in the transformation of special educational needs. I'd want to suggest, I think we note at this stage, but it might be an appropriate time, unless members have anything else they want to raise, just to check. I think we had agreed to seek from the Law Centre an idea of their timescales, perhaps, to come and do a more finalised position on the regs. Have we had anything back on that?
So they are going to engage with DE, and they couldn't before today,
Yes.
because of people not being here. So they're going to get back to us as soon as they can and engage with DE.
Okay, so we'll just keep a watching brief on that, because I think I don't want to let the SEN reg scrutiny drift, but we need to have all the evidence before us, I think, before we start making any decisions. Other than that, are members content to note the rest of note or action the correspondence as per the summary note in your packs? Agreed? Okay, item 10 then is the forward work programme, and there's a draft for members in your packs. So just very briefly remind members, we have our concurrent meeting with the Economy Committee next week at 10:30 in the Senate Chamber, so it would be good to have a good Education Committee attendance. We've always had a good record of attending those concurrent committee meetings, so it would be good to continue that. And I would just ask again for members to link in with the clerk and her team around availability for any additional meetings, as there is a possibility, I think, emerging. We may need some short, sharp meetings just on a couple of issues if time begins to beat us towards recess, so if members could just note that. So the other things I just wanted to note for members in terms of just a time scale on our PMBs, because I think it's important to track this. We would be hoping at next week's evidence session, now there is some evidence still to be heard from Irish medium stakeholders, but would be hoping to be able at least to move to informal clause by clause next week, with a draft committee report hopefully before us on the 24th, and followed by formal clause by clause on the Irish Medium Education Workforce Plan Bill, possibly with informal clause by clause on the holiday meal payments at that stage. Conscious we are not where we need to be with amendments on that, so that we may have to review that, and then that would leave us with the 1st of July, unless we require any further meetings, to hopefully agree the final committee report on the Irish Medium Education Bill, and perhaps at that stage of amendments have landed the formal clause by clause on holiday meal payments bill. So I just wanted to check members are content with those timescales. I think there is a sense getting this done by recess would be preferable, but we do have some slack for holiday meal payments if that is required in September, but not a huge amount. So as much as work we can do at this stage, the better. I did just want to raise one issue, and it's around Department for Communities on holiday meal payments. I think maybe we weren't completely clear last week that there were some concerns still knocking around. We'd only had a response from DFC around the impact of the bill on universal credit, but it was referenced pension credit, legacy benefits and carers allowance could be an issue. So I mean, I think we do need to be right into DFC in fairly short order to seek clarity on any impact on those benefits, which have a means tested element as well. And if the committee, the Communities Department wanted to make officials available for a short online briefing, I think we would hopefully all be happy to facilitate that if we are all agreed and to take that forward. Agreed. Okay.
We haven't got the surveys closed yet, but Jonathan has put tables in your pack today that show everything that's up to date so far. So that will help just kind of keep the PMB work trucking. Thank you, Johnny.
And thanks to Jonathan for that. I think in terms of keeping all that material collated and a place that members can deal with it all centrally is very helpful, so that is appreciated, and we would want to note that. If we're content to endorse the forward work programme just based on those updates, then that just moves us to item 11, which is any other business. Is there any other business? No. So final item in the agenda then is date, time and place of next meeting. So we have a concurrent meeting with the Economy Committee next week in the morning as discussed, and our next Education Committee meeting scheduled for Wednesday the 17th of June, 2 p.m, room 29 and online. And I'll put the question on that basis that the committee meeting does now adjourn. Are we agreed? Agreed.
Committee room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29, Sound. Committee Room 29, Sound.